Okay, welcome for everybody that has been waiting. I see you, Malevolent Rider and Lennon McCarthy. Great video, Comrade Trumpsky yesterday. One of the, but not as great. I'll tell you what, it was great, but he used the Magic Man song. Have you ever heard that song by Heart Magic Man?
I think I know which song you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that song, so I guess it was better than actually hearing the song. But he made a parody of it, which was actually pretty funny. With Vladimir Putin doing karaoke, but
That sounds pretty awesome.
he did one. I think it was like a couple months ago, and I had. I mean, I actually did a belly laugh when he made like the title, and I don't think he thinks it's as funny as I do. But it was T for the Tillerson, which is a Cat Stevens. Do you know the album, the Cat
Yeah, I
Stevens
know the one
album?
you're talking about. That's awesome.
I was like, holy
Actually,
shit.
I'm going to be working on parody soon. So ever since Justin Trudeau changed around the songs of the national anthem to make it gender neutral, so people have been telling me that I should make a politically correct version of the Canadian anthem. So that's what I'm going to be working on soon.
Yeah, I want to do. There's a parody of an REO Speedwagon song I want to do on the current Israel Gaza stuff. So, um, uh, let me see. Tea time for the Tillerson. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, Lennon McCarthy. I think we should do like a conference call sometime next week or something. And we also have.
Sounds good.
Yeah, yeah, we
He's like
should.
your most loyal watcher, eh?
Well, yeah, and I'm like I actually I reciprocate because I always look at his shit posts and they're some of the most epic ones that there are. So I think he started out more as a Twitter guy and I started off more as a Facebook guy. And I found my way to YouTube and he found his way to YouTube. And maybe one day YouTube's gonna. I mean we don't know where everybody's going, but those platforms are falling apart. Um,
Well, I hope Facebook crashes and burns.
Yeah, Facebook. I don't even bother posting as bold like a leopard there anymore. I just, I have my personal wall, but it sucks. It's just awful. And nobody, and they're definitely filtering everything. So we have a number of topics that we're gonna tackle today. Of course, there's Gaza, Israel. I have, I think, yeah, I do have it in the description. I have this piece. What did they have to lose? It's a bad impression, but Donald Trump would say, "What do you have to lose?" Well, if you're talking about what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Jerusalem, the only person who's he won on every front on this in this thing was President Trump. Everybody else had something to lose, and that's my perspective. You're free to disagree with me, as always. I did do. Where is this? I did. Oh man, I'm gonna have to pull up some images. Oh crap.
Yeah,
Am I
thanks for
supposed to?
sending me that too, because I had been looking for you on Mines, but I kept looking for Bold like a Leopard, and then I looked for Starscream, and that I didn't even think about looking for Chef Leopard.
Yeah, it was. What was it? Yeah, I think a couple months ago I found you. Damn it.
John is asking if you can make the overlay bigger.
1 second. Overlay bigger?
I think it just means the camera.
Oh, yeah, sure. Is that good?
He'll let us know.
Um. Okay, yeah, John Sislowski. I think we also know him from Twitter. I think he also follows Lennon McCarthy. Um. And by the way, this is just my stupid opinion over here, Adrian Lloyd. If you guys haven't, I mean, we've been on a few already. Um, he says, no, I meant the content overall. I don't know what you mean. Can you make the overlay bigger?
Maybe he's just trolling us.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, 1 second. There was a photo I made. If you guys saw the thumbnail, and I know people are into making like really snappy, like self advertising nowadays. And this is mine. I hope you guys can see it. and this is a photo of me, circa 2008. Back in, can you see this? I don't think you can.
No, I'm not seeing anything right now.
You're
I
gonna
see
have
the
to,
chat, and I see the chat, and I see our image, but I don't see the thumbnail.
you should be able to see it on the 1 second. Yeah, you should be able to see it.
Oh, there we go. Now I see it.
Okay, so
Might just be a delay.
I made this up today just because I saw Dave Rubin say something very smart today, and I was feeling very jealous, as I want to do when people do things, when people accomplish things they're better at than me. I feel jealous and I want to rip them off. So he said something, and it's at the bottom of his it's during his chat on Sunday with Ben Shapiro, the guy whose name I love mispronouncing. And
You do that intentionally, don't you?
yeah, because there's a lot of Jews who Shapiro is a Jewish name, and I'm Jewish. But there's a lot of Jews who get offended if you say Shapiro. But there's a lot of Jews who go by Shapiro. So I don't know. I understand what the problem is. You know. But I think, yeah, he goes by Shapiro. But I think OJ's lawyer was Robert Shapiro. And I'd never heard him object to it. And like, I think he even calls himself on that stupid legal Zoom commercial, Robert Shapiro. But anyway, we're wasting time.
All right, yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, with all this, me, shit talking. But he said, if you truly believe in freedom, not just because you say you believe in freedom, but if you really want people to think for themselves, they're going to start thinking some things you won't like. And that's a pretty smart thing to say. So I wanted to outdo him. And I'll let you guys be the judge. It says, if you find yourself agreeing with the same person on literally everything for 3 consecutive days, you've either stopped thinking for yourself or you're living in a compound in Waco or Guyana. So I think I left out the preposition a, so I've already failed. So Dave Rubin, you've already outsmarted me. But what are you gonna do? I gave it a good try.
I like it.
Can't win them all. Anyway, so yeah, my article here, I'm going to run through it as quick as I can because it is really long, as I always write really long. And,
well written, though.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you. And I actually wrote one the day before that about the Palestinian side, and we can review it as well if anybody wants for a brief period. But people think that it was a win-win situation for the Israeli government with what happened at the embassy and the U.S. not objecting, so to speak, to what happened on the Gaza border with the people dying of various violent deaths, including getting shot at and tear gassings. So not to be glib about it, but I still I've seen multiple reports and even videotape from Gaza saying, well, I mean, those people, they did work for us. They worked for the Hamas movement. So, I don't feel like any, not that I usually feel emotional about this type of stuff, but I don't feel any real moral qualms about saying, people died because they were told to run towards a fence by a group of people who threatened them or deceived them into doing it. I mean, I don't know how other people are reacting to it. I don't know how you would react to it, Adrian.
Well, I actually, I guess it was about 2 days ago now, I put out a tweet concerning about the whole situation, and what I actually have it right here, and I said, I hate seeing so many people killed and injured in Gaza, but don't forget Hamas using these people as human shields and are using these people as political shields and tools. If they care about the Palestinian people, they would have their soldiers standing in front of the civilians, not behind them. And that's more or less my take on it, is the fact that like the deaths, like I never like seeing like sort of these mass killings, these mass injuries, but when you take everything in context, you gotta remember that this was a mass assault on the Israel border, and Israel does have a right to defend its border. And even if you disagree with where the boundary lines are, as it stands today, those are the border lines. So either way, Israel does have a right to defend itself. And even though I put it in the tweet, I said these are civilians. It's probably just being a little too generous, because I think you've given up the right of just being a civilian if you're making an attack on another country's border. You know, and
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And or I mean, let's say if by their definition of civilian, it would be the same thing. If I mean, remember, if you watch some of these films like the Football Factory about soccer hooligans, and you see them rioting in a stadium, well, they're civilians. Why would the police beat the shit out of them and haul them off to jail? They are civilians, and they're angry about something, and so I look at it in that way, but keep going.
well, anyway, yeah. The first thing about it is, because I guess this also kind of might go a little bit towards the March for Return, but they talk about how these people are fighting to get their homes back. But most of these people, probably all of them, were never alive when the 1948 war happened, when all this territory was conceded, or most of the territory was conceded. So I don't know why they seem to think that this is their home now, because they were never born there, and even if their roots are there, that's not the way it is now. So just I think really more than anything, it's just Hamas using them as tools, because again, if it's doing exactly what Hamas wants. You know, everyone hears about how many people are killed, how many people are injured, and because of it, it strokes the outrage, especially on the left-wing politics, and it makes Israel look like the bad guy. But what would any one of us do if there was ever that situation on our border? I mean, right now I don't know what the current situation is with it, but just a week or two ago, the migrant caravan arrived on the U.S. border, and while these people aren't assaulting the border, if they were making an assault on the American border, we could definitely expect the National Guard would be there and be willing to defend it, whether that means using violence in order to do so.
Yeah, and I think that I see Sean Lankus in the chat saying the U.S. shouldn't be involved. That's my perspective on this. So yeah, I think if you guys think like that, I think we're kind of on the same page on this, because this is where my article goes, and it is. I mean, if you're not on Minds.com, please join Minds.com. I think you can still view the article if you're not a member of Minds.com anyway. But in any case, check it out. It's the first link in the chat. And I do say, you know, the whole issue is here, and I might get a little long-winded here. So, I've already talked to Adrian about stopping me if I go too long. But the thing is that you have to understand that Trump's strategy, so far as Middle East peace is concerned, is a vast departure from the Obama administration paradigm and the Bush administration paradigm. So up to this moment, let's analyze it. What did the right wing, the AIPAC people, the Netanyahu government, what could they have lost? I mean, they got everything they wanted. They got the embassy in Jerusalem. The border breach did not really work. The March of Return didn't really accomplish any of its set objectives. So what did they have to lose? You might be saying, well, your article is bullshit because they didn't lose anything. But I'll tell you that what's going on here is sort of Trump's, it's his play for resolving whatever he can in the Middle East before he pretty much says, I'm not going to give a shit anymore. I'm just not going to participate, which I think President Bush should have said it. I think President Bush should have done that, and then it wouldn't have been left over for Obama. Possibly there would have been no, well, we don't know about an Iraq war, but we wouldn't have had. I think that generally Bush's attitude was probably the opposite of Trump's on this, which was that, I'm fine with intervening. I'm fine with being involved in this Middle East peace charade, and I'm also fine with invading Iraq, which is the way that he looked at it, and it was a wrong policy. So I'll start with this. In 2015, that's when I would say that U.S.-Israel relations reached their low point. That was with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action being approved by Congress through I think the Senate foreign affairs committee with Bob Corker. They ended up finagling some weird way that it could work. Even though there was no majority, I think they needed only a third of the senators in the Senate to approve it in order for it to pass. Usually it's the opposite. Usually you need a 2/3 majority in order for an international treaty to be approved by the Senate. In this case, it was the opposite. You needed a 1/3 minority. I mean, when have you ever seen that you need 1/3 of the elected members to approve something? So that was the Iran nuclear deal. That has nothing necessarily to do with the Palestinians. Again, Iran and the Palestinians, two separate things. We shouldn't conflate the two. People do try to do that, and I think that that's dishonest. Therefore, after that, everything else connected to the relationship between Netanyahu and Obama took a turn for the worst. And Netanyahu himself was undergoing an election at the time, which Obama was funding some of his opponents in order to erode his support. And he did lose some of his support in the election, but he still survived and was reelected. So since then, he's been accused of several, credible corruption complaints, concerning arms deals with Germany. I think they were for submarines and some pay-to-play issues. So anybody who's now calling Netanyahu some sort of grand statesman or whatever, well, however much you admire him, he's a deeply flawed politician, possibly a very corrupt politician. It's not the United States, but innocence until presumption of innocence. I think we can still extend that even to foreign leaders, just like I do to good old Putin. So Netanyahu, like I said, everything else in connection to his relationship with Obama soured. So you had Obama not vetoing. He told his UN representative, Samantha Power, the same woman who used to complain at the UN all the time about Syria, but she had no plan of action regarding it. So there was a resolution 2334 which condemned the Israeli settlements that Obama did not instruct her to veto. For those of you that don't know, there are 5 countries, I think, in the UN Security Council that can veto a resolution. I think it's France, the UK, Russia, China, and the United States. If I missed one, it's because I can't count for shit. So they demurred on vetoing it. I think they abstained on the resolution, and it passed. And suddenly the Israel lobby, as it always does, overreacted to such an extent because it's a non-binding resolution. Yes, you can disagree with the tenor and the spirit of the resolution, but in reality, Obama's lack of support was exactly that. It was a lack of support for something that was in fact kind of symbolic. And it was a known policy of the UN. They are opposed to Israeli settlement activity in the West Bank and previously in Gaza, which was withdrawn from in 2005. So, by then everything was totally embittered between Obama and Netanyahu. That was in December 2016. Also, if you missed part 1, which was, it's also in the description in terms of the article, which is about the Palestinian Authority, President Abbas had consistently refused to engage in negotiations directly with Netanyahu. So nobody was getting along with anybody. Netanyahu wasn't getting along with Abbas. Abbas wasn't getting along with Obama because he didn't want him selling weapons to the Israelis. And Netanyahu wasn't getting along with Obama because he was pretty much calling him an asshole all the time and then selling him weapons. So, it's a dysfunctional relationship any way you look at it.
I am a little ignorant on the Bush administration and what their stance was in Israel. I was also young during the time of the Bush administration, so I only know so much of what went on during that time. But yeah, I remember watching that going on during the Obama administration, and Obama seemed to be for the idea of a 2-state solution. But whenever anybody talks about this two-state solution, I find that they leave out a lot when considering this, because the one thing that I find that when I learned about this, it was really eye-opening for the situation between Israel and Palestine, and that was the Khartoum resolution in the 1967 Arab League summit, which pretty much stated the three no's with Israel, which is no recognition of Israel, no negotiation with Israel, and no peace with Israel. And when you have those on cards on the table, there's really nothing you can do to get around that. And time again, Israel has tried to come to the table and they've tried to offer some solution that would actually lead them to some sort of peace. I mean, but again, neither Hezbollah nor Hamas ever really wants to. They want their cake. They want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. They want the whole pie or nothing. And because of that, this is what's leading to so much violence and so much friction between the two parties. And ever since Israelis pulled out of Gaza, well, since then we've just seen as Hamas has just loaded up the Gaza Strip with rockets and terrorists. I mean, they're constantly trying to tunnel their way into Israel, and Israel's always having to destroy them. But no one ever brings this up when they're discussing the Palestinian conflict. It's like they either don't know or they're being willfully ignorant on the situation. And I find that it's more likely has to do with willful ignorance, because if you do see these, you do know about the Khartoum resolution, then the whole situation on supporting the Palestinians seems to fall apart.
Yeah, and I would say that you're bringing up the Khartoum resolution, which is from way before the '93 Oslo Accords, but that has been, certain countries have broken with the Khartoum resolution. The first one was Egypt in the late '70s, and later Jordan. So, some countries will never break with it, and that's their official. I mean, Syria, for example, will probably never break with the Khartoum resolution, because that's been their official policy. Is that because they reject to the hilt any possibility of negotiation with the Israelis. And, I guess if you want, you can, I mean, again, it's a foreign policy decision. Is it the correct one? Is it the one that's going to get you the best outcome? I don't think it has. But, I strive to do, being somebody who I was in the IDF, I will definitely say I'm never going to advocate on behalf of anybody that's going to threaten my cousins and my uncles and my family, and try to murder them. But at the same time, if I want any, I would rather give the proper amount of detail and criticism to people like Netanyahu. And this is a German cartoon about him poisoning the peace process over here, but over here at the left. But I'd rather give due criticism to him and give too much detail than later just be called, a mindless partisan, because my objective is finding a better solution. It's not necessarily satisfying people who are super pro-Israel, or on the other hand, people who are super anti-Israel or pro-Palestine. If I don't see a way to improve a situation by just repeating what somebody says, that's why I put that thumbnail. Then I'm not going to agree with somebody. That's why I don't agree, for example, with Mayim Bialik, that actress who goes to Israel, that hardcore feminist who's a Zionist. It's like, I'll just make my own arguments. I don't need no feminist to make them for me. So anyway, there was a lot of acrimony between Obama and Netanyahu. There was even Jeffrey Goldberg, who's a hardcore liberal, but also a former IDF soldier running for the Atlantic. He reported that there were people in Obama's staff that called Netanyahu Aspergery, which, Asperger is the disease. I have a brother who happens to have it, which is like, I mean, it's a weird way to describe a foreign leader. Some would say it's offensive. I don't care. And then another one said he was chicken shit. According to Goldberg, who's very liberal, by the way. And he did support Obama in many of his policies, especially domestic policy. So on the other hand, Israel in the West had one of the lowest approval ratings for Obama. And the Netanyahu administration certainly didn't trust him, especially after the 2015 election. So then Trump shook things up. He comes, he does this APAC speech, which we could watch some of it, but it'll be too long, and we'd probably people would rather listen to him than us. But one surprising statement he made was that he would be Israel's best friend in Trump's rhetorical contradictory way, but he would also be neutral in negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. And it was a very sly trick he did, if it was a trick, because immediately you had these APAC people, and I don't support APAC. I don't support any lobbying group. I think we should probably overturn Citizens United here in the U.S., which, if you're from abroad, Citizens United allows political action committees, super PACs, to contribute money to parallel organizations during elections that are not connected to a campaign in order to produce what do you call it? Electoral advertising or propaganda, whatever you want to call it. So I would say I don't agree with APAC. What he said was breaking with APAC orthodoxy, where you as a presidential candidate you're supposed to say all this crap, about the embassy, which is a symbolic thing. It's done. So I'd like to say, good for him. It's a symbolic gesture, but all these people are now satisfied by it, and then or they are satisfied for now. But the fact is, if you look at this map over here, the U.S. Embassy is it's a former UN compound, this little area over here. You can see these dotted lines around it. So on a legal level, I think that, and if somebody wants to research this, it's former UN territory. So whatever happens, they can always claim, it was never Israeli, or it was never Jordanian. It was never Palestinian. You can't take the embassy back. What are you going to do? You're fucked.
Pretty much, eh? At this point, what's done is done, and it's too late to do anything. And actually, I got to admit that it did surprise me when Trump did make that move to move the embassy. Like, he actually carried through with it, because we had Obama, who ended up saying he was going to do it. Not that I don't think anyone really expected it. George Bush said he was going to do it. And even Bill Clinton said that he was going to move the embassy. And they've all they mirrored each other's statements. And it's like, we recognize, more or less saying, we recognize Jerusalem as the official capital of Israel. And, we need to do something in order to move the embassy there. So I thought it was just more, smoke and mirrors. It was just him more trying to get the vote. But he actually went through with it which is amazing to me. I really thought it was just going to turn into a whole lot of nothing. But when we're talking about APAC, I find that the one thing about when we're talking about some of these Israeli lobbyists too, is they do seem to have a lot of influence in America right now. And that is actually what I think is one of the biggest thing that fuels some of this talk that we're having these days about the JQ and, Jewish influence. And I think it has more to do with APAC and their other Jewish lobbyists, because when you have so much influence, then it actually does look like Israel has some control over America, or has a lot of influence over America. I'm not sure why they've actually, maybe you can answer that question. I'm not sure why they've actually managed to gain so much power as a lobbying group.
Yeah. I think I could probably. There was a book I read back in the past by an anti-Israel Republican congressman named, I think his name was Paul Finley. And again, like I say in the thumbnail, you don't have to agree 1,000% with everything. Ron Paul, for example, was very critical of Israel as a congressman. I still would say he's affected most of my domestic policy beliefs and a lot of my other foreign policy beliefs. But I'm not 1,000% interventionist. But APAC, they were one of the earlier lobbying groups that were formed in the 60s. And, the fact is that, yes, they have become the same way that I criticize the NAACP and other NGOs or nonprofit groups here in the U.S. They've gone on for so long that they don't know when to say enough. And they've really gone way too far. And at this point, I would say that they're the classic case of a lobbying group that got too big to fail. They're very married to defense contractors, GE or some of these other defense contractors, they'll donate money to them, and it's their right and whatever under the law. I'm not going to tell people how to spend their money under the law. Lockheed Martin, all those companies. Um, I'm just saying here that the lobbying groups have gone way too far, all of them. And when you have these senators that are basically they're tailoring their language to suit the interests of donors. It works that way in the Democratic Party. It works that way in the Republican Party. And it doesn't. It's not conducive for a good foreign policy, and it actually is not conducive for an independent Israeli state, because then they're too tied to the United States. The U.S. State Department then has strings that they can attach to certain issues of that relationship. And by the way, the State Department is the opposite of Congress. They're more influenced by what do you call them? They're more influenced by the oil lobby, which would be in Arab states and other states that are hostile towards Israel. So you have a real issue there where the State Department and Congress are at cross purposes.
Okay, that does definitely make a little more sense too, I guess. But in terms of everything that's going on in Israel too, I've noticed that everybody seems to be doubling down on their sides, because I know over here we've had all the left-wing parties that are completely condemning the violence and saying something has to be done. There has to be international intervention. For instance, our prime minister, the liberal prime minister, has just said that he wants an independent investigation into the events that took place in Israel. And also even the media too. CBC up here, Canadian Broadcast Corporation, they were very critical of what was going on, talking about how many people ended up getting killed and how many people were injured. And I think maybe one of the reasons up here was because there was a Canadian medic who ended up getting injured. And like the other day when you were on my stream, we kind of covered this, I think, and that's been and that I thought that was kind of horseshit, because he was well designated as a medic. He was wearing all of the appropriate gear. He was wearing one of those fluorescent vests and everything. So it seemed to me that it was pretty obvious that he was a medic and ended up getting shot anyway. Whether it was intentional or on purpose, it's not clear right now. But everybody everyone at first was talking about how tragic it was. Yet what ended up coming out maybe it was today or yesterday, was the fact that out of almost the 60 people that ended up getting killed, 50 of them turned out to be fighters for Hamas, So that kind of changes the perspective on everything once you realize that there were a lot more fighters that were actually injured that were killed than the civilians, or if you want to call them civilians. Again, I don't know what other word to use than call them civilians, but I don't think they really deserve the term when you are actually doing an attack on the enemy border. And thing is too is everybody is trying to equate this, the fact that everyone is trying to equate the fact that no Israeli soldiers were killed. I don't know if any got injured, but they're trying to act as that means that it's completely one-sided, and then Israel is the bad guy just because of that. But Israel is the one who are in the defensive positions, so of course they're actually going to come out on top. It's very hard to go up against a defensive position in militarily speaking. Sorry, I seem to be stumbling over my words today. Militarily speaking, you're going up against a defensive position, especially when you don't have the appropriate gear in order to do so. Then, of course, you're going to come off worse for wear for them. But and even like some of these, maybe it was even you the other day who told me about that. Even the kid that got killed, and everybody was up in arms about a child getting killed. It turns out that he was actually at home, and then his uncle took him to the border, and he ended up getting killed. So what the fuck are you supposed to do?
Yeah, he died of tear gas suffocation because he was in a tent near the protests, and the Israelis, once the mobs really started building up, they dropped tear gas canisters from a bunch of drones. So how are you supposed to know who's inside those tents? You don't know if it's an 8-month-old baby, as was the case, or it could be just a cooler full of Faygo soda or something. It could be.
Absolutely.
Who knows? What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to read minds or whatever, and people argue about intent or whatever. A lot of the stuff that was happening on the border, there's clear intent on the part of Hamas, which that's not the discussion as of right now, because I'm assessing like the Israeli side more. So my case here is this: with the Israeli embassy moving, this is hypothetical, so don't hold me to it. And if I get the prediction wrong, I'll just admit that I was wrong. Because the American government has given them their most symbolic jewel, the embassy in Jerusalem, the fact of the matter is that they can now demand from Netanyahu that he concede more things to the Palestinians should there be, negotiations. And they will say to him, here, this is from the Jerusalem Post, okay? So this is from May 4th, about, almost 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, it says, according to some sources, this could just be some bullshit leaks. But they're saying Trump to ask Israel to withdraw from 4 East Jerusalem neighborhoods. And those would be over here, Essaouira, Abu Dis. I think I was in Abu Dis on service. I was patrolling there in Jebel Mukaber. And I think the other neighborhood isn't on the map. I don't know why they don't. Shuafat. Shuafat would probably be over. What the fuck? I think it's up in the north, so I don't think it's shown here, to be honest with you. So, oh, here we go. Yeah, I was right. This is Shuafat refugee camp. So Shuafat is up here on the north. This is the French Hill, which was captured during the '67 war. And in any case, yeah, if Trump was to demand those things, then how would Netanyahu be able to defend any refusal? Because Trump would just say, I mean, look, buddy, I gave you whatever the fuck you wanted in terms of this embassy, in terms of ripping up the Iran deal and all that. If you're not going to negotiate this, we might have to potentially concede this to the Palestinians and say, oh, we're gonna support their side in any vote. Now, where this what this really depends on, though, is if President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority agrees to come to the negotiation table, which he hasn't done since, I think, 2008, when Netanyahu's predecessor, Ehud Olmert, was in power. That was the guy who was prime minister when I was there. That guy was really an idiot. And he's in prison now, I think. So, yeah, I mean, that's really my perspective. I mean, they lost something from it. AIPAC, what are they supposed to ask for now? A bag of dildos? I don't know. I mean, what are you supposed to? I mean, you've gotten everything you wanted, and I'm trying to be fair. I don't know if I am being fair, but I'm trying. I hope you can see that.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can't just keep asking and asking and asking, and expecting people to give you literally everything you want. Eventually, you have to say, the military aid. Let's stop this bullshit. Israel has its own domestic arms manufacturers. They have the capacity to produce weapons if they need to. The United States does not need to give corporate welfare to our arms contractors, fueling all of these rumors of the JQ and people controlling the United States. Well, I mean, if the JQ is controlling the United States, then or whoever it is, the lobby, the Jew lobby or whatever, then a lot of these companies need to write a thank you letter to them, because those companies are not staffed entirely by Jewish people. They're staffed by a lot of people from all over the world. And who else did I mention? Oh yeah, remember the Never Trump, or the Trump opponents in the GOP? Well, now they have nothing to say regarding this matter. They can't go. I mean, he's literally shut them up as far as this is concerned ahead of 2020. And then you have the Never Trump idiots like this guy, who they by the way, hardly any of them mentioned anything about this entire topic the entire week. All these people who built their careers, we're the pro-Israel people, the Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol. I don't know. I mean, Lennon McCarthy might know what I'm talking about because he's he's a Twitter guy. Maybe Larry does too. But these idiots, they're the people. They're always, before Trump, they hate global warming, or they hate global warming. They say, it's a myth or whatever. Once Trump pulls out of the Paris Climate Accord, oh my God, Armageddon, that's their reaction. It's the same thing here. They didn't say shit about anything this week, especially not this idiot. He said probably 80 things about Robert Mueller, which we're going to get to later, not regarding him. And, I'm just tired of it. And I put this 4-point, and I know you wanted to say something, so this is the end. This 4-point program of what I think has to happen, ending all military and financial aid to Israel, along with the rest of the world, by the United States. This has created a codependent relationship that compromises the sovereign democratic will of the electorates of both Israel and the United States, and for that matter, any other state with a similar relationship to the U.S., such as Colombia, which is a fact. We have lots of military aid going there. Then, if Israel and the Palestinian Authority do not agree to come to the negotiation table, specifically due to Abbas's reticence, the Oslo Agreement must then be abrogated and the fraudulent peace process ended for good. And then this is for, people in the audience. Rather than support Israel through lobbying groups like AIPAC or oppose it through AstroTurf progressive groups like J Street and Jewish Voice for Peace, American Jews should embrace efforts to overturn Citizens United and divorce U.S. foreign policy from defense contractors and other lobbyists. And then anyone concerned about U.S. foreign policy being too close or too far from Israel should also reassess whether we should be allied with Turkey, members of the UN, or us being members of the UN, or in any way connected to the European Union. So I don't know. I mean, what do you want to say before?
Well, I was just going to first say that you were wondering if you were maybe being too critical or something. If you were being fair. All in all, I actually say that you've been critical where necessary, and then you'll support Israel where necessary. So I think you actually are pretty fair when you're talking about this. Also, when we're oh crap. Sorry, I have a crappy memory, so I always tend to lose my train of thought where I was going with that. Give me one sec. Where was I going with that? Crap, I forgot it. I'm sorry. I'll remember it in just a minute. Yeah, this is what I mean. I got a really crappy memory when it comes to this. But, right. So anyway, one thing that I'm wondering about this whole thing with what Trump's doing is a few months ago, I don't remember which video it was, but I talked about how there were things that Trump's good at and there's things that Trump's bad at. And I always said that I thought Trump was horrible on the world stage. I thought that his foreign policy sucked. But I've been starting to reassess that a little bit with everything that's going on in the Korean Peninsula. I know there's starting to be some tensions again as Kim Jong-un is starting to threaten to pull out of the meeting that is set up between him and Trump. But I've also started to wonder if maybe Trump is actually does know a little bit more than I gave him credit for, because he's put a lot of pressure on the Korean Peninsula, and then we actually saw some results out of that. Now I wonder if maybe this is something similar that he's doing with the Israel. He's putting a lot of pressure on the Palestinians by supporting Israel, and we've already mentioned that Israel's been willing to come to the table. Palestine is not. I'm wondering if he's putting this pressure on the Palestinians because maybe it will persuade them to reassess their situation and come back to the table. So I wonder if I don't want to give Trump credit and too much credit, like people say, like he's a master of 4D chess. I don't think he's a master of 4D chess, but I do wonder if this is his strategy of coming in with a heavy hand. And then when people are starting to see that like he may actually do something, they're starting to go more lenient, sort of what happened with Kim Jong-un. When it looked like Kim Jong-un had the ballistic missile, he put I think it was the 7th Fleet over he had them sitting just outside of South Korea, which put a lot more pressure on Kim Jong-un to end the program. So I wonder in some ways that this is what he's doing with Palestine. If he shows that he has all this support for Israel, and Palestine's thinking that Israel has the support of America, if ever if tensions get too high and it was to go into another conflict, maybe will actually persuade them to come to the table again and actually try and negotiate with Israel for a more peaceful resolution.
Yeah. I think with Asia, what's happening in Korea, it's a pretty difficult situation for him too, and I think it is better, like I said when I ripped off Dave Rubin's idea. If you agree with the same person for 3 days in a row, there's something wrong with you. And if you think everything Trump is doing is correct, I mean, you might be under his charm a little too much. But what I will concede especially with Asia, is he's much more effective than President Bush and President Obama, with dealing with China, and which I always maintain, China, which I don't hate, but it is the biggest threat to the United States, and well, I guess us. I don't give a fuck about some of these other countries like Panama. They can fend for themselves. But yeah, I'm just saying that I would rather have him than either of those idiots. And a lot of the other people in Congress, I don't think that they'd be good at it either. The guy I would have voted for, Rand Paul, very good guy, smart ideas. I don't know if he would have been as good of a person in terms of interacting with foreign leaders as Donald Trump is. But, we're dealing with hypotheticals there. If Bernie Sanders would have been elected president, I really struggle to see how he would have dealt with, with China especially. And does that mean that I'm not open to the possibility that somebody would be better at it than Donald Trump? No, I'm just saying that it is proven to be that he's better than the people that preceded him in these dealings, especially with the trade negotiations. And the other alternatives in 2016 were pretty bad. They just were.
I'm getting called out by your chat right now for being high because I forgot my train of thought.
It's okay, man. You come from a culture of intoxication, so we're being culturally sensitive to Canada.
Hey, that's what happens when it's winter 9 months out of the year.
I know. I mean, so there was a great story out of Canada earlier. The woman who furiously shits on the floor of Tim Hortons and throws it at employees. So originally I thought it was, and we're going to switch topics, but I thought it would be fun to at least cover this because everybody, I don't know if you saw that other story with that guy in Manhattan shouting at employees for speaking Spanish, which is literally everywhere now. And they're hounding the guy in New York City. There's all these reporters, and he shares the same name as somebody I know, so it's pretty ironic. Somebody who happens to be of a very different political belief system. So I think somebody yelling at employees for speaking Spanish, I think it's bad taste as a customer. I wouldn't do it. I think when I go to a store, I want to buy my thing, whatever I want to buy, and leave without talking to anybody. But it was a pretty ugly incident, and what he said was to some degree, I can understand if somebody's offended if you say, oh, don't speak Spanish, speak English or whatever. But to hound him in the streets as they have been doing is I believe, an overreaction. But a bigger overreaction is doing this. So.
No, I absolutely agree because I do kind of understand both sides of the argument because I understand one thing that I'm starting to see too is I take the bus a lot. If I'm not walking everywhere, I take the bus a lot, and I have noticed that when I'm sitting on the bus, I actually do hear other languages more than I hear English or French up here. And when you're living in your country, and and all you hear around you is different languages, it can feel like you're kind of losing your culture or losing your place inside your country. So I understand where it's coming from, but hounding somebody just because they're speaking another language is ridiculous. And I also actually Tim Hortons is I used to work there, and they always have employed a lot of immigrants, and sometimes it is actually easier for them to communicate with each other in their language even when they're working. Sometimes they stumble over their words. So if they actually, it is easier for them to communicate in their language. I'm totally for it, especially what type of restaurant was this where this guy got hounded?
Well, no, he was hounding the employees, and it was I think it was called like Fresh Express or something like that. Fresh.
Okay.
What's the guy's name? Uh, Lawyer anti-immigrant.
Well, yeah, anyway, it's just what I do know from living in this sort of being in this sort of business is that it's all about even more
Fresh
important than
Kitchen.
anything.
That's what it was called. Sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
go
okay.
ahead. Yeah.
In this business, it's all about speed of service. It's all about getting as many people in the door and out of the door as possible. So again, something like that is not a big deal to me. Like if they're speaking in their language in order to make things go faster. And I also have in the past, I've seen a couple times as employees that I worked with, they got hounded for it in the same way. I remember actually specifically, we had this one woman when I worked, and she had a hard time with English where it was very difficult to understand her, but she did everything she could. And someone left a comment about her saying, like, if she can't speak English, she shouldn't have a job here, which is completely ridiculous because everybody needs a job in order to survive, unless you're planning to live off the corporate welfare system, which I'm sure most people are against, or at least a large portion of the population is against. And just hounding an employee at work for over that is just absolutely unnecessary.
Yeah. Was she like from like Pakistan or like China or something or?
I think she was from Vietnam.
Yeah, and I think you know a lot of these people who are super anti-immigration and they're all about speak English is America. I do agree we should educate our children here in America in English, and in Canada, except for one specific province that is uh, I would say a little behind the times. They also stick to English. Um, Although I mean, think about it. If you really wanted to, you could make Chinese mandatory in British Columbia or something. Or I think there's even parts of Canada. I heard that you could even make a case there's majority Ukrainian or something. So, I mean, where do you define the standard? I think the standard is that at schools you seek to have people, educated in the most uniform language possible to create a more cohesive society. In the workplace, it's kind of a crapshoot. No pun intended, Tim Hortons. Um, some places I think it is more crucial to be able to communicate in English, and other places not as much. So, I think this was a bad situation, and the guy deserves something. It does say here that um, the city of New York is going to investigate him with a commission on human rights. I mean, what do they want to do? I mean, that nobody got fired, and the guy's life is basically ruined now. His law practice might be destroyed. So what are they? I mean, this I think is too much of a witch hunt, and the Tim Hortons Pooh coffee customer I think is also that one I think is more interesting personally, but maybe I'm biased again. So
Well, right now we're having this problem. I find it's been going on for like, I don't know, maybe about a decade now, where somebody that says something that pisses off the public, well, that means their entire life has to be torn down and destroyed. And one of the best ones I can think of is I think it was in 2014 or 2015, that one woman who sent out a tweet right before she got on a plane to Africa, and she's like, "I hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white." And by the time she got off the plane, she was already fired from her job. And this is something that has gone on many times. We want to completely destroy somebody just because they said something they didn't like. But I think more or less the social backlash that they get more often than not is enough punishment enough that they don't have to lose their job over it. Um, About a month ago, there was a bus crash up here that killed. It was the Humboldt bus crash that
Yeah, I
some
heard about that
underage.
one. The Humboldt
Yeah,
Broncos. Yeah.
yeah, there was like 14, 15 kids that ended up getting killed in this bus crash. And then there was this this one journalist who ended up coming out and saying when it turns out that the GoFundMe page for the victims was one of the most popular GoFundMe's that ever happened. And a woman ended up commenting, and she was a journalist, and she commented on about how it gained so much attention because of the whiteness and the maleness and the youthfulness, and she got a hell of a lot of backlash for it. But she didn't lose her job, and I was even somebody that commented on what she said, and I talked about how disgusting I thought it was what she said. But one thing I was at least happy is that she didn't lose her job over this, because again, we can't destroy someone's entire life just because they say something we don't like. And in the future, again, if they get fired from there, what are the chances that they're going to be able to find at least a good paying job like they do in the future? They're more likely going to be reserved to some shitty little coffee shop or fast food restaurant or something like that.
Yeah, I think there was I don't know, maybe forgive me, I'm gonna look this up. But there was an editor who was fired earlier. I think it was today for something regarding. Okay, here we go. Let's look at Steven Crowder here. Pittsburgh editor fired for no. Well, it doesn't link to it, but they actually. I'm gonna have to find it. Some other stream, sorry, but yeah, there was an editor who called him basically a Nazi or something, and got him to lose his gig in Pittsburgh, which is no loss. I mean, Pittsburgh sucks anyway, but he had to make a little money, and I mean the money's still green in Pittsburgh, even if the streets are brown like shit. So
careful, dude. Someone might take that as a racist comment.
Yeah, I was actually in Pittsburgh last year. It's nicer than here. It's just we have like an inferiority complex here in Cleveland because Pittsburgh always kicks the shit out of the Browns, which I've never been a fan of the Browns, but everybody makes fun of Pittsburgh here, and vice versa, and everybody in both of these cities makes fun of Detroit. So we're very very cohesive country, the United States, aren't we? Was going to say, yeah, there was a story about an editor getting fired for slandering, what's his name, Owen Benjamin, and then everything that she said about him ended up being false. But I'm going to have to find the article and discuss it tomorrow.
No problem. We can save that for another stream. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can even find some time tomorrow. Anyway. Yeah, Len McCarthy brings up the Jimmy the Greek scandal. That was a crazy one.
I'm actually not familiar with that one.
Jimmy the Greek was like a football and gambling pundit. He used to know everything about how to bet and whatever. What's happening with these retracted messages?
I'm not sure. I just saw that a couple of times. Yeah, there was a couple of retracted ones.
Yeah, how does that happen?
I don't know. I thought that was I thought it was only moderators that could do that.
Yeah, is it YouTube doing it? Yeah, but McCarthy's the only moderator I have. I don't even remember how he became a moderator. I think I just did it by mistake one time, and I never cared. What was I going to say? Yeah, Jimmy the Greek was this gambling pundit who was like great at calling baseball and football games. And one day he got caught in an interview that he didn't think that he was talking to like a real reporter. I think he thought he was talking to somebody who had like no audience or something. And the guy was asking him about black athletes, and he made some comment how slave owners would breed black athletes to make them more powerful and whatever. Which in some cases, I guess you could probably say that type of stuff did happen. I mean, it's messed up.
During slavery, it did happen. Yeah.
Yeah. But he was like making it seem like, oh, that's like the smart thing about it. I mean, the guy was like kind of an old style. I think he was from Steubenville, Ohio, which is like it's like a redneck town over here. So it was pretty much a town that was run by the mafia. here in Ohio. So yeah, so they pretty much, this was in the 80s. They pretty much ended his career over it because it was like astonishingly racist for a media member to say it. But he never had an issue working with black athletes and talking to them. He was a pure, he all he cared about was gambling and football and baseball. I mean, he was otherwise kind of an illiterate guy who liked sports.
Oh, so just for saying that's stupid. Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, do you know who Bob Costas is?
Name's familiar, yeah.
So Bob Costas is still one of the like most well-known sports commentators out there, and he used to be on the same show as Jimmy the Greek, and Jimmy the Greek went away forever, and Bob Costas is still around. Yeah.
Interesting.
That was actually before my time.
Well, the one thing I worry about is that I feel like this sort of, with the way that our society is going, I feel like this is only going to get worse if we were to have another Democratic, like a Democratic president was to get in, or if the Democrats were to take back control. I feel like, considering how much the social justice warrior progressives have taken over the Democratic Party, it's almost inevitable that there would be more restrictions on this sort of thing. That's why we have to kill the blue wave.
Yeah, so that's great. So you just gave me a perfect segue into the latest. Actually, I forgot to put my article up too. So we'll have to go to Hard News Network, where I had my. So I wrote this article. I think last week I completed it after the primaries here, and I say that there's not a blue wave in 2018, but it's the ship's just going to run into a sandbar. And for those of you that, you're landlocked people, landlubbers, that means your ship's going to run aground and you're not going nowhere. And yes, there's still a possibility that the Democrats will win the House. I don't think that they're going to do very well in the Senate. They're probably going to lose a couple of seats in the Senate. And I didn't make like a hasty video about it last week that I never released because I was like, there's so much I left on the table I didn't touch on. And I went through all the reasons. And I actually shared it with some of the people, the Bernie people out in California that I talked to, that you've seen on a couple interviews that I've done. And they know that I don't agree with them on a lot, but, I wanted to hear their opinion, being as they still are progressives. And the feedback that I've heard back is, yeah, it's a good assessment. It's a good assessment of what's going on with them. And I made a few fine points, which is in it. There's some issues that are already evident with the 2018 campaign. As a residual symptom of the 2016 campaign, Democratic politicians and political campaigns continue to foment hysteria concerning the Russia investigation conducted by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, which gives plenty of material for Len McCarthy's channel. Excellent examples are a baseless article by Brent Badowski in The Hill, floating EPA Chief Scott Pruitt as a replacement for Jeff Sessions in order to fire Mueller, as well as a MoveOn.org petition to protect Mueller. Which, by the way, they can't do that. you can't file a petition in order to protect a certain position that under the Constitution the president can fire. Petition doesn't do anything. To compound the obsession with Russia being an error, a CBS News poll now finds 53% of Americans see the probe as being politically motivated and unjustified. In a related matter, polling by Harvard and Harris, which is kind of a liberal polling group, showed that allegations concerning a 2006 affair between Trump and Stormy Daniels had actually increased his support among men. And, it's to be expected. A lot of guys would probably say, they look at the photos of her back in 2006, they'd be like, yeah, I'd probably do that if, I didn't have anybody else to sleep with because my wife was pregnant or something. You're not obligated to comment on that because I know that you're married, but I'm gonna say,
I plead the fifth.
Yeah. Well, but you're Canadian. You have to plead the weed.
Damn it, we don't have anything like that up here. I gotta plead the fifth.
Oh, I forgot. What's the question?
But the thing is about the Stormy Daniels situation too is that I know it doesn't actually match the legal terms for revenge porn, but this is kind of how I feel like what everything that's going on with Stormy Daniels it really is if this was the other way around, Hillary Clinton came into office and then a male porn star came out was talking about this and then trying to get famous off it, trying to make world tours, trying to make money off it, then I have no doubt that that's exactly what people would be claiming. And the point is that whether you agree or disagree with these payments that Trump made about keeping her quiet, then she's going against that and she's coming out in the public. And the whole point of it is just to slander the president. So if he was not a man, I could totally see people as using this as would see it as a political tool, everything that Stormy Daniels is doing. So even though it doesn't match the legal definition, I would actually call it a form of revenge porn. So I think revenge porn has to be either video or images that are posted online without consent.
Well, it's extortion, and they've made the point that the lawyer for Stormy Daniels is now involved. I mean, he's just being raked. He's threatening journalists who are trying to report on certain issues that he has, including a coffee company that he was once a part of that he left in massive debt and cheated his partners on, apparently. Allegedly. I don't want to get sued like he's threatened literally 50 journalists with, including the Daily Caller. The guy runs around everywhere talking about rumors of things happening with Stormy Daniels. He's on TV all the time yelling about Trump or whatever, and then you say something about him, oh, I'm going to sue your ass. I mean, that's the face of the Democratic Party for the past couple months, and I don't see the guy very often because I don't watch television, and I'm focused on stuff that interests me. But it's really that they've picked one of the worst people to represent her, and it's the same thing as some of the the individuals that were involved in that issue over in Florida in February with the people dying due to certain devices, which we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube. Some of those individuals, they became so toxic in terms of their personality and in terms of their public image that movement kind of burned itself out. It blew up. The fuse blew, and people are just tired of it. They just don't want to hear about it anymore. And you don't hear about them unless they tweet something dumb.
Absolutely. And I think just talking about those kids over there, I think that the real problem that with what they've done, especially with someone more specifically, I think I'm talking about someone like David Hogg, is the fact that they were given so much popularity.
I prefer to call him the individual that is not to be named for fear of being banned. But go ahead.
He who must not be named.
Yeah.
All right. So he who must not be named. The one problem I saw with everything that they did is they gave him so much popularity, and they made them feel that their points were so relevant that now that they're taken out of the spotlight, I feel like they're going to spend the rest of their lives trying to get that popularity back. All they're going to do is either make a fool out of themselves, or they're going to go down a really dark path in order just to get all that popularity back, be back in the spotlight. Because I think about what I was like when I was a teenager, and maybe me a little bit, but definitely a lot of other people that I think of, if they were given that much attention, well, then that's like they just revel in the limelight. So I actually think that they've done more, that the media and everybody else has done more damage to these kids than good.
Right. And, that's to go with some of the next bullet points I made. The party's base is riven by divisions between corporate AstroTurf movements like Indivisible and the Women's March, which, they've also burnt out their support through having people like Linda Sarsour and their whole belief in Farrakhan feminism, which, it's actually a concept that I made up, but they actually believe in it. So do we, by the way. We're both Farrakhan feminists, right, Adrian?
Are we? Oh, yeah, yes, totally.
Yeah.
Yes, Louis Farrakhan.
Yeah, he's the guy. Supposedly progressive opponents like Justice Democrats, as well as diehard Sanders supporters and identity politics groups, which, everybody can believe whatever they want. The diehard Sanders supporters, by the way, I'm not saying it because I object to them. I'm just saying they don't have a home right now in terms of people that are going to represent the policies they want to put forward. Adrian lives in Canada. They have the NDP, which is much more consistently progressive than the Liberal Party. So there is an option, or there's the Green Party, I believe, right?
Yeah, Green as well. But the Greens are like very irrelevant. They got like 1 seat in the House of Commons right now, so they don't really matter.
So yeah, there is at least the possibility of voting. There's not a two-party duopoly. It's not. No system is perfect, but there's more options in the Canadian political system. By the way, in the British political system as well. So a lot of the options are crap, but there's more of them. And then there's identity politics groups. You have these groups that are the DACA kids. You have some of these. How many of these? There's like the transsexual group, which Zoe's not here tonight. Calling me names, so there's no transsexual representative on this stream. But the people in the chat know what I'm talking about. Adrian's like, who the hell am I talking about?
but I take it just somebody who's giving you crap for even talking about it.
It's an inside joke. So the party cannot seem to. This is the most important one, I think, for many of us. The party cannot seem to exercise itself of the shadow of the 2016 presidential nominee Clinton, and her "What Happened" tour produces gaffes almost on a weekly basis, such as the one in India where she blamed Middle America for moving backwards. There have actually been several ones since then, and I just can't keep track of all of them. I think the latest one she said in Australia that Americans are afraid of women having power. So I don't know what the hell that means. And I mean, we have somebody in the chat who voted for Jill Stein. So, what's this here?
Kick them.
Bacon. All those options, and they got stuck with Trudeau.
That's exactly how I feel.
So, yeah, exactly.
Lennon's like, Zoe's a trap?
Right. Yeah, so the issue with the Democratic Party is far more, it's deeper than having Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as Jimmy Dorshow likes to say, and not just him, Thomas Frank, a lot of progressive commentators know, and they're very adamant to say nowadays that and they were probably saying it back in 2015. They were saying, well, the state of the Democratic Party is as bad as it is because of the Obama administration, because he did bail out Wall Street, because he did do things like approve drone strikes, and he did approve a lot of fracking in the United States, which progressives do not agree with. You can support progressivism, you can not support progressivism. I choose not to in most matters because I prefer my own, the gender that God gave me. But there's people who do, and they have every right to. And especially with the Wall Street thing, the Occupy Wall Street issue with bailing out the big banks. They have a fantastic point. Those of us that believe in fiscal conservatism, we don't believe in bailing out failing businesses. We believe in having them restructured through bankruptcy. How do you perceive that issue so far as Obama being kind of a sellout to progressivism from the lens of somebody not from the U.S., Adrian?
Well, I definitely started to see that. I was definitely seeing that during the Obama administration, because you had people like the Young Turks that were definitely railing against him for the things he'd done, whether that happened to be the drone strikes or supporting the oil companies. And I don't know. I guess in some ways, I think right now I would say I don't really feel that he was really a betrayer to the progressive movement. However, if I was farther on the left, I probably would agree with them on that because of things like the oil, they are all about green energy, the green energy program. So yeah, I would say that it really just depends on where your point of view is. But there's been this division in the Democratic Party for some time now, absolutely. And I think that's really one of the biggest problems that came on with this election too. More that it came to the forefront in this election when you had Hillary Clinton going up against Bernie Sanders. I actually think too that the progressives have done more damage to their side than they would like to admit, because a lot of these Bernie supporters became they were Bernie or bust. It's like either we get Bernie or we're not essentially going to scrap our vote. We're never going to vote for Hillary Clinton. So I think they actually shot themselves in the foot with everything they did. And because of it, it allowed it, from their perspective, it allowed them to give the rise of Trump. So yeah, I guess my opinion would just be it depends on which way you look at it.
Yeah. I'm looking at the chat. We got Pinochet, who is a total, he hates anything relating to progressivism, and he wants to drop him from helicopters. Well, the issue I have with that is you don't need to do that necessarily. Let's keep that on the dry erase board, okay, for a different time. Because I'll say this, I'm seeing Lennon McCarthy and Larry Gerke said, well, we voted for Jill Stein and now we're kind of more for Trump. And, it's parallel to my experience. I think I was 15 when President Bush got elected in 2000, and I grew up in a Democratic family. And at the time I thought, maybe Al Gore, maybe Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader would have been the guy I would have voted for. Ralph Nader was the Green Party nominee back then. And, I wasn't old enough to vote yet, but then the butt hurt from Al Gore and the Democrats blaming Ralph Nader. I was like, fuck this party. I mean, it's just a bunch of complaining morons. And, what's it called? Yeah, Larry's saying I'm shaming him. I'm not saying I wouldn't shame you. I probably would have voted for Ralph Nader if I had, I was, again, underage. Then the next election I didn't vote because I didn't give a fuck, because I knew Bush was going to win. And I wasn't going to vote for him because I thought he was, not very intelligent. And I didn't know what the big issues were at the time. So the next time I actually became politically conscious was when Ron Paul was running for president in 2008. And I was finally seeing, this is finally a person gets kind of a larger picture issue. Our troops are stationed all over the world in places where we haven't even had a war zone for 60 years or whatever. We have troops in the Philippines, unfortunately. We have troops in Okinawa. We have troops in Italy. We have troops in Turkey. It's time to reduce that. It's time to bring them back home. And therefore, we can reduce the size of government and commit more resources to returning, actually not even commit those resources, just reduce taxation to the absolute minimum and create an economy that's much more akin to that of Switzerland. And I don't regret having that change of belief system, but it didn't take having to drop people from helicopters to do that. So Pinochet's fighting with McCarthy and Gerke over there. So that was just an aside.
Well, I was always actually a big supporter of the Paul family. Even when I was a liberal, I did like Ron Paul when he was a senator, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly.
Oh, and he was always a congressman, but yeah,
he's a congressman.
His son is a senator. Yeah,
that's what it is. Okay, yeah, but when the election started up, I was actually, for the Republican side, I wanted to see Rand Paul to get the nomination between all of them, even over Trump. That was the one I was supporting. So I was a little depressed when he finally dropped out of the race. I was hoping that he'd get it, but in the end, I mean, Trump was wasn't as bad as I thought he was going to be. Because I guess I was never a never Trumper, but I kind of saw him as the same way, belligerent. His tweets were always attacking everyone. I didn't think that was very necessarily the best way to go about it. But I think there were some things I didn't take into consideration with that. For instance, it's like he got overwhelmingly negative press coverage. So going to Twitter and Facebook really was his only options. But yeah, no, I always found myself a supporter of the Paul family.
Yeah, I think during the 2016 election, I really, I remember him running for senator at first, and they were running all this bullshit against him, like that he did some sort of frat prank when he was in college, where they did something with this Aqua Buddha thing. It was one of the dumbest stories I've ever seen, and none of the smears against him. They've smeared him with everything that they're doing now to everybody. They've called him an anti-Semite, or because of his dad that he's anti-Semite. I think his dad said, he has some negative attitudes towards Israel, but I wouldn't classify it as anti-Semitic attitudes. And, once again, like, the title says, if you agree with somebody on literally everything for 3 days straight, I mean, it's a problem. And that's how I approach Ron Paul. There's a lot of things I really, really like about him, and the things that I don't agree with him, I can live with. But once he dropped out, yeah, I had the same feeling. I really felt let down, and I thought, there might be no reason for me to vote in 2016. I was going to vote for Gary Johnson. I was going to vote for Ben Carson or whatever, and people kept saying, Trump is an awful person and he's disgusting and whatever. But you could see sort of this, if you're watching his press conferences, you could see this manner of behavior in him that it was somebody who was that, immovable object that the press couldn't deal with. I remember him masterfully embarrassing Jorge Ramos, who was the head of Univision and Fusion, and the guy was, it was just an embarrassing spectacle what he did. This was in spring 2016, complaining all the time about, this is a nation of immigrants or whatever. And Trump was like, look, you can have your soundbite or whatever. I'm against illegal immigration and, screw you. So, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Mm-hmm. And the more and more people started, shouting at him, and there was Vicente Fox, which was the Mexican president, coming here and saying, we're not going to build your fucking wall or whatever, and people complaining endlessly. And, then there were people who had their noses far up Hillary's rectum. I was like, yeah, I think I might end up voting for that asshole Donald Trump, just to screw with them. And it's like that. I mean, it was just a natural reaction. And that's what the Democratic Party does to you. They just make you vote for something that's the complete opposite of all the nonsense that they talk about. And, I did it like an analysis here, which I'm not going to run through. But in the actual vote, the red states got redder. And I used Wyoming, Idaho, and Arkansas. And remember, in Arkansas, she was first lady for 12 years. And she earned the worst showing of any candidate of either party since 1988. Okay, I mean, that's like a statement of how incompetent you have to be or how hated you are. And, she's not really an Arkansas lady because she is from Illinois originally. And then after that, she moved to New York City after living in D.C. as, the president's wife and whatever, part-time wife. Yeah.
Well, she was only there for the press coverages, and then he went to go see Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, the part that mattered, she wasn't covering.
Exactly.
So, then the swing states. This might not necessarily be Hillary's fault entirely, but she does have some blame to assess from losing Pennsylvania. Ohio, she lost by also the worst margin. Ohio is now almost a red state entirely due to her. And I live in this state. And we have a large union following here. And people just don't care anymore about the Democratic Party. I've talked about it several times. Then there's Michigan, which is an even more blue state in the past, and Wisconsin. She lost all those states. And it's like, I mean, what do you have to do more to prove that you've just been a failure? And then there are certain states that are trending further towards the right that haven't gone yet. They could go into 2008. New Hampshire, she almost lost. She won it with 3,000 votes. Now, it hasn't always been Democratic, but it only recently became a blue state. So it's not as if this was like a colossal change in terms of amount of people, but it was still a very, the margin of victory for Trump in the Electoral College could have been much easier if more people would have turned out in New Hampshire. Sorry, somebody just fell.
Oh, no problem.
And then Minnesota is, many people are talking about it trending towards the right as well. And if Minnesota were to fall, the Democratic Party would be dead in the Midwest entirely. They would have no states voting from them between Virginia and Colorado or something.
Well, this is actually one of the reasons that I believe you may actually be a little more positive about the blue wave than I am. I think the blue wave is just completely overblown. I actually don't think in the 2018 midterm elections they're going to get anything, because aside for everything that's gone on over the 2016 election, such as the fact that they had Hillary Clinton as the nominee, and a lot of people didn't like her. I mean, you definitely heard the ones that were always, the I'm with her type people. But most people that I seem to hear that were talking about voting for Hillary, it was more of they were planning on plugging their nose and voting for her. They didn't really want her as president. They just saw Trump as maybe the greater of the two evils. But I think also the other reason is that people are also seeing how unfairly everyone's been treating Trump, and that he's actually done some things that people like, but yet despite that, the Democratic Party will consistently crap on whatever he does. I mean, it was Nancy Pelosi that said that called Trump's tax cut crumbs. It's like it's crumbs to the people. But anybody who even has a little bit of financial hardship knows that it's going to help them out. But then they see the Democratic Party completely turning against that. And even the most recent thing is this whole thing about Trump calling the immigrants animals. I put that in quotations because he was talking about the MS-13 gang. And, they're trying to pass it off as if he's talking about all immigrants this way. In fact, there was even today, I saw a tweet by a YouTuber called SoFane, and he was saying how Trump was trying to set people up. He was trying to make it seem like, well, if you criticize what he says about them calling them animals, then all Trump supporters are just going to say, well, you're supporting the MS-13 gang. But this is literally what the context was. He was talking about gang members coming in and doing this crap. And I mean, the MS-13 gang is one of the most brutal gangs out there right now. But yet people are trying once again to spin this to be something terrible that he says. And I just don't think people are buying into it anymore. Even the left-wing voters, I think a lot of even Democrats now are starting to see this and starting to think it's just blown out of proportion and that it's completely unnecessary. If they could actually treat him a little bit more fairly, I think that the blue wave would have a much better chance of actually surviving the 2018 midterms.
Yeah, I actually made a video in February, and I have to find it, but geez, it was about MS-13 and the issue of the Democrats just don't want to address it at all, ever. Where was this? It was concerning Joy Reid, and she made this claim in, wow. We can play it for the audience. You won't be able to hear it, though. I can send it to you in the chat so you can hear it.
Sounds good.
But, yeah, here we go. So, while somebody in media said, let me send this to you in the chat, and you can open it on your screen. So, that's the one thing that I can't do with, what do you call it?
OBS?
OBS. So,
yeah.
Let me know when you're ready.
Almost. All right, just loading now.
So Joyanne Reid.
Okay, good.
Yeah, go to the 4 minutes and 41 seconds mark. It's MS-13 gang document.
4 minutes 41, you said?
Yeah. So the context of this was that in the State of the Union address, Joyanne Reid said right after it that if it wasn't for Donald Trump, nobody would even know about MS-13. Nobody, because it's not really a problem. But the fact of the matter is that you could find on her network an MS-13 documentary on MSNBC. Documentary, America's Deadliest Gangs. I think it's from Gangland. So you can see.
Oh, Gangland. I know that one. They're good.
Yeah, this is about MS-13. This is they put up the Mara symbol and everything, and it's available. It's open source, bro.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I see it now.
We are known. We live in a country where every single
go shoot him. Oh, lovely.
Piece of information that you need is at your feet. Yeah, so I'll put this in the chat. And, they just lie for no reason. I mean, why lie about that? And this is the media too. It's not even necessarily the official Democratic Party, but they just provide cover for them. And then there was this issue, and we'll move on to the last topics after this because I know it's getting late. I don't know if you have work tomorrow or something.
No, not tomorrow.
So the other thing is that they had this race last year for DNC chair, and it was just a joke. And one of the reasons it was a joke was because the main candidate who ran originally was Minnesota Congressman Keith Ellison, who is a self-denying Farrakhan feminist. You and I are open about it, but he's just in the closet about it. It's just sad that people can't proclaim, for Minister Farrakhan and feminism. But Keith Ellison, yeah, he's a Nation of Islam former preacher, now just a regular Islam preacher or something, or advocate and believer, sorry. And Keith Ellison was originally the candidate, and he was a Bernie Sanders supporter originally. And, he was going to win, but because the corporate Democrats were so spooked about, first of all, Bernie Sanders supporter winning, second of all, that the optics of this guy who has, a lot of skeletons in his closet winning, scaring away some of these donors, including some of the donors I mentioned with respect to, there are pro-Israel donors in the Democratic Party. There's also pro-Palestine ones. So they were like, no, we can't have him. He's going to spook some of these donors. So they pressured Tom Perez to enter the race. And, if you could find somebody who is a worse candidate to lead anything than Keith Ellison, they found Tom Perez. And they also found a number of other people, including this one. So let me see here.
Black Lives Matter.
I'm going to send this to you in the chat as well. So you get that, let me know.
Cool, got it. I just got it quickly.
So this is Sally Boynton Brown, who was the former head of the Democratic Party in Iowa. And I believe she ran for the Democratic National Committee chair because it was a good way to get plane tickets out of Idaho. Sorry. Dade Murphy, if you're watching this, I don't mean any disrespect to Iowa. I meant Idaho. So he's from Iowa. I just slip of the tongue. So yeah, she wanted to get out of Idaho, where the Democratic Party is virtually non-existent. They don't have any officials except for like in some towns where there's like a couple colleges. They have a couple state legislative people, and that's about it. So this is what she said.
And it makes me sad that we're even having that.
You got it. Press play.
Yep, good.
Conversation, and that tells me that white leaders in our party have failed. We have to accept that there is prejudice that exists within our own party, and we have to be able to have that conversation. We cannot sweep that under the rug. We cannot continue to hide it. We cannot.
Nothing better than seeing a white person bitch about white people.
Scream, listen to me. You don't get it. I'm a white woman. I don't get it. I am pleased and honored to be here today to have the conversation. I am so excited that we're here. And I am listening because that's my job is to listen to the issues.
I'm a white woman. I don't get it.
Hold on.
And my job is to shut other white people down when they want to interrupt. My job is to shut other white people down.
Oh boy.
When they want to say, oh no, I'm not prejudiced. I'm a Democrat. I'm accepting. My job is to make sure that they get that they have privilege. And until we shut our mouths and we listen to those people who don't, and we lift our people up so that we all have equity in this country, so that we're all fighting alongside each other, so that we are all on the same page, and we clearly get where we're going, we're not going to break through this. This is not just rhetoric. This is life or death. This moment in our country,
is unbelievable.
The Democratic Party has the opportunity to do something different. We have the opportunity to really confront the fact that we have not been in alignment with our values. We've been talking a lot of smack. We need to make sure that our actions and our words and our values all match. And around the issue of race, we are so far out of alignment, I don't even know the way back. But I am listening, and I am asking, and I am talking to people. I am talking
The video
to people
freezed on my end, but I can still hear the audio.
Jesus, though, that's just ridiculous. Actually, I think the best part of that, two best parts, is number one, as she's bitching about white people. You have, I don't know who it is in the back, but you got that one black woman who's like smiling about it because she's probably thinking, you stupid white bitch.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I love how she's talking about how white people, it's my job to tell white people to shut up and it's time to listen. There's literally a black woman behind you. You could let her talk, but instead she's doing the talking.
Well, I mean, there's funny people. There's funny outcomes for almost everybody that was in this race, and you know, some of them appear in this frame. The woman behind her on the right, Jammu Green, was a Democratic Party official in Texas, and there's like a funny clip of her grimacing while Candace Owens is arguing with her on Fox News. And she just can't. I mean, she really wants to call her, you know, all sorts of names, but she can't because, you know, it's national TV. So, you know, I mean, we can't do this the whole entire night. But I'll send it to you one time, and maybe we can talk about it next time. But
sounds good.
And then there's the other person in the frame is this guy behind her from South Carolina who, you know, also his party was completely bankrupt in South Carolina. So the only reason he was running was to get out of South Carolina. And then the guy to her left, you know, my left, is this guy, Ray Buckley, who was a pro Bernie Sanders guy who they just used this whole privilege crap against him. And he had to, I think, withdraw. And then there was another Bernie guy who didn't get any votes. And those were the two most qualified candidates in terms of reforming the party. They happened to be white guys that were Bernie bros, but they were more qualified necessarily than obviously this clown who was trying to get out of Idaho. And the funniest outcome was her, who she got rewarded with the presidency of the Florida Democratic Party, which is definitely a step up from Idaho in the Democratic Party. And then a bunch of people in the party got implicated for like some sort of crazy sexual harassment crap, and she had to resign. So you know, she thought she was getting a promotion, and then she lost it. So I mean, what are you gonna do?
That's too perfect.
But really, you know, not to like belabor the point, but there were good candidates in the race. They just couldn't get a break. They couldn't get any help because the race was not a real race. It was between, I think there were 450 delegates to the DNC that are not elected. They're pretty much party bosses by state. And Tom Perez knew ahead of time that he was going to have half of them, and Keith Ellison knew he was going to have slightly less than half of them. So they had dinner like the week before the final vote. They probably knew what was going to happen after that, and, you know, they're just talking about, you know, I'm going to get the intern with like the bigger rack, and you're going to get the one with the bigger ass. Something like that. You know, that was like that was probably the conversation they were having. That would have been, you know, this is going to get me in trouble one day, and I'm sorry, but that would have been the conversation I probably would have drifted into, and you know, but I'm trying to be honest here. They're not.
No, absolutely, and I find that's always been a problem, actually, that I started to notice once I got a little more politically aware. And one of the reasons that I stopped being a liberal is because time and time again they're willing to lie and turn against their values whenever it's convenient. In fact, that's actually just not too long ago. I was watching a couple Star Wars movies again, and I couldn't help but feel that a lot of these Democrats and liberals actually would be, if they were living in that universe, would actually turn out to be part of the Sith rather than part of the Jedi, even though they like to see themselves as part of the Jedi. It's just little things that are like little quotes from the movie I was thinking about. Like in episode 3, there's one where Obi-Wan Kenobi says to Anakin, like Anakin says to Obi-Wan, he says, "If you're not with me, you're my enemy." And Obi-Wan responds with, "Only a Sith deals in absolutes." And I couldn't help but feel that that's exactly the sort of narrative that the Democrats and liberals have these days. It's if you're not with me, you're my enemy.
Yeah, and before we go on, I'd like to state on the record that I'm against sexual harassment in the workplace. So, just to clarify, I'm against it, and I comply with any policy of any corporation that says that. That was a joke what I said about Tom Perez and Keith Ellison. And also, I don't want to offend any of the massive corporations that I mentioned in this broadcast. What else? So, you guys can read that article too. I'll put it in the chat. And there's a lot more there. It's just that, there's so much to talk about, man. I mean, so much. I don't know if you feel the same way, given that you're also a busy man. Actually, I don't think I could put it in the chat. Whatever. I'll put it in the description later if you guys want to go back. Jeffrey Allen Johnson, way to cover your ass, Bull. Hey man, you gotta do what you gotta do. I do it I'm trying to help people say whatever they want, but to do the thing that's righteous in their own eyes. That's the attitude that I take towards this. Last topics. How much time do you have left? I want to talk about Italy. I want to talk about the Mueller probe and the spy in the Trump campaign.
I got as much time as you need, man. Okay. I got nothing in the morning tomorrow, so it doesn't matter if I go to bed late.
All right, so let's try to do this in 25 minutes, and hopefully we'll be done. So, let's talk about the Mueller probe. It happens to be the first anniversary of the Mueller probe today. I was hearing about it on the radio. What's your confidence on a scale of 1 to 10 in the competence of Robert Mueller?
-5.
And the audience can also put in, what they think. Yeah, I would like to say that I would say the number E, which is an imaginary number, for those of you that that know some mathematics, E the exponential, because this whole thing is an imaginary bit of fucking nonsense. If you wanna support, maintaining the security of the country, we have to investigate actual computer hacking. Actual issues. Yeah, actual issues. I mean, China and other countries, Pakistan, also Russia to some extent, but, other countries, not just Russia, are hacking.
I would even say, I would just quickly jump in and say, I would even say that North Korea probably has better hackers than friggin' Russia.
Right. Or you have to broaden. A problem doesn't necessarily have to have only one source. And in this case, they're totally misdiagnosing the issue, because it has nothing to do with computer hacking. And as, McCarthy says, as Gerke, in the chat says, probably all the other people, Pinochet, are well aware, and, we're preaching to the choir here. The hacking issue has really never been, there's no truth to it, so far as we can tell. Based on the evidence regarding the DNC leaks, which they are what I believe them to be leaks that were provided to Julian Assange through a person within the DNC, possibly a person who is no longer among the living, whose name, his name rhymes with Miracle Whip. So, it's just frustrating, man. It just is. And I kind of feel for Alex Jones, because, he has some of the same beliefs as we do, but he has a much larger platform and people talking to him. And he's been saying this stuff for a long time, and there's plenty of evidence to substantiate his suspicions so far as that theory goes. And yet, the regular, suit and tie media, they don't want to acknowledge that the fact is that this was, in all likelihood, not a hack. It was a leak. And here we have evidence from the Wall Street Journal that the FBI hit a mole in the Trump campaign, which in and of itself, it's very deeply troubling for the nature of American democracy. Imagine if Justin Trudeau was infiltrating the New Democratic Party or the Conservative Party in Canada using actual security service moles. What, you guys have the CISS or something,
Yeah, CSIS.
or the what is it, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or any type of law enforcement or intelligence agency infiltrating a campaign of a political opponent. It taints the nature of our democracy. And you can joke about it, but I mean it's a huge problem.
Oh,
So
absolutely. I mean, I was somebody that when they first started to talk about the Russia situation, I actually thought there was possibly something there, like I was willing to hear them out, see what the sort of evidence they had. And at first, I didn't really think, I guess maybe it was some ignorance on the FBI, but I didn't think Comey really had a reason to lie or anything like that. But as the investigation went on, my confidence in it just kept dropping, dropping, dropping. And one of the big ones for me was when they indicted Manafort for tax evasion. Because I thought that this was going to be the guy that if and there was anything there, this is where we were going to find it. And then it turned out to be nothing. In fact, I've said a few times, if they gave him the Al Capone treatment. They had absolutely nothing. They gave him the Al Capone treatment. And then the other thing is, if they had so much evidence, which way they were making it out seem right off the start, they were saying like, well, it's almost undeniable. Like once this, I guess the narrative started just after Trump got into office, or maybe just before, like after he got voted in, but before he was actually sworn in as president. They were making it sound like they had all this evidence, but a year's gone by and they have absolutely nothing. And then even most recently, I think it may have even been you last time we were talking that mentioned this, is how he indicted the 13 Russians. And then when one of them actually, like one group actually stepped up to challenge him on that, suddenly Mueller was backing down on it. He's like, oh, well, we can't go to trial right now. We need some more time. And he just started completely doubling back on everything that he was saying before and his entire confidence. So for me, I have no faith at all in this investigation whatsoever.
yeah, and it's there's more examples just coming out all the time. With that one too, there was one company that was part of the indictment that turns out to have not even existed. And then there was that people laugh. There's like an expression in the U.S. Legal system, I guess, called a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. And people who watch Lionel's show may have heard that expression before, because it's saying you can write an indictment for anybody, but whether you can prove the case and get a conviction, that's a different matter. Then there was another issue of the Manafort trial. The judge is like, he's not even buying it. Now, what people should remember, though, is that there are two trials with Manafort. There's one, I think, in D.C. and the other one's in Virginia. I believe in Virginia it's likely to be thrown out. I might be wrong. I might have it backwards. You can't keep up anymore, by the way. It's just too much crap going on with that guy, Mr. Mueller. On Tuesday, the Washington Post reported that Nunes was denied access to the information on the grounds that it could risk lives by potentially exposing the source, a U.S. citizen who has provided intelligence to the CIA and FBI. After the White House caved to Rosenstein and Nunes was barred from seeing the documents, it also emerged that this same intelligence had already been shared with special counsel Robert Mueller as part of his investigation into alleged Russian involvement in the 2016 U.S. election. Now, this would be a problem, because those people who are on Mueller's team, the question with them is why would they have higher security clearance than the House Intelligence Committee? It boggles the mind, because a lot of people on his team are not necessarily former members of the FBI. A lot of them are simply lawyers of one, prosecutors of one form or another, and they would have to have proper clearance in order to view that information. So the question is, why would they have higher clearance than Devin Nunes? On Wednesday afternoon, however, news emerged that Nunes and House Oversight and Government Reform Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy of South Carolina would receive a classified Thursday briefing at the Department. So I guess that would have been, last week, at the Department of Justice on the documents This is, to put it lightly, incredibly significant. Why? Because it appears that the FBI may have had a mole embedded in the Trump campaign. In a bombshell op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, Kimberly Strazzle shares a few insights about recent developments. Perhaps we should start with the ending and let you take it from there. And needless to say, Strazzle's claims, if true, would have made wide-ranging implications for the CIA, FBI, DOJ, and former Obama administration officials. Strassel concludes, I believe I know the name of the informant, but my intelligence sources did not provide it to me and refused to confirm it. It would therefore be irresponsible to publish it. So, I mean, I think she's hinting at Carter Page.
The FBI agent, eh? One of the ones that were exchanging texts?
No, that would be Peter Strzok. Carter Page was the guy that originally they were saying, oh, that's the guy who spied for Russia. So, I mean, in this case, he would be a double agent. So did the Bureau engage in outright spying against the 2016 campaign? The Department of Justice lost its battle with Congress Thursday when it allowed House Intelligence Committee members to view classified documents about a top-secret intelligence source that was part of the FBI investigation in the Trump campaign, even without official confirmation of that source's name. The news so far holds some stunning implications. Among them is that the Justice Department and Federal Bureau of Investigation outright hid critical information from a congressional investigation. So, those things are public record or at least Congress has the right to subpoena them. In a Thursday press conference, Speaker Paul Ryan bluntly noted that Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes's request for details on this secret source was wholly appropriate, completely within the scope of the committee's long-running FBI investigation, and something that probably should have been answered a while ago. Translation, the department knew full well it should have turned this material over to the congressional investigators last year, but instead deliberately concealed that. House investigators nonetheless sniffed out a name, and Mr. Nunes in recent weeks issued a letter and a subpoena demanding more details. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's response was to double down, accusing the House of extortion and delivering a speech in which he claimed that declining to open the FBI's files to review is a constitutional duty. Justice asked the House to back its Stonewall, and it even began spinning that daddy of all super spook arguments that revealing any detail about this particular asset could result in loss of human lives, which is complete bullshit. Unless the person threatened to kill himself.
I would say the only risk to human lives right now is the fact that the FBI is spending so much time on this investigation, because when I think back to a bunch of the mass shootings that have happened over the last year, how many of them did we hear that, they were on the FBI's radar, but somehow nothing ended up happening? For instance, that happened with the Vegas shooter, that happened with the Parkland shooter, and I'm sure there's a couple more in there that I'm forgetting about, but I would say that's the biggest threat to people's lives right now.
Yeah, it's there's definitely other things the FBI could be and the Mueller investigation is not the FBI per se, but yeah, there is focus within the FBI on this as well that is could be spent elsewhere. This is desperation, and it strongly suggests that whatever is in these files is going to prove very uncomfortable to the FBI. The Bureau already has some explaining to do. Thanks to the Washington Post unnamed law enforcement leakers, we know Mr. Nunes's request deals with a top secret intelligence source of the FBI and CIA who is a U.S. citizen and who was involved in the Russia collusion probe. When government agencies refer to sources, they mean people who appear to be average citizens but use their profession or contacts to spy for the agency. Ergo, we might take this to mean that the FBI secretly had a person on the payroll who used his or her non-FBI credentials to interact in some capacity with the Trump campaign. This would amount to spying and is hugely disconcerting. It would also be a major escalation from the electronic surveillance we already knew about, which was bad enough. Obama political appointees rampantly unmasked Trump campaign officials to monitor their conversations, while the FBI played dirty with its surveillance warrant against Carter Page, failing to tell the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court that its supporting information came from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now we find it may also have been rolling out human intelligence, John le Carré style. I actually never read his books. I heard they're pretty good. To infiltrate the Trump campaign. which would lead to another big question for the FBI. When the Bureau has been doggedly sticking with its story that a tip in July 2016 about the drunken ramblings of George Papadopoulos launched its counterintelligence probe. Still, the players in this affair, the FBI former director Jim Comey, the Steele dossier authors have been suspiciously vague on the key moments leading up to that launch date. When precisely was the Steele dossier delivered to the FBI? When precisely did the Papadopoulos information come in? And to the point, when precisely was this human source operating? Because if it was prior to that infamous Papadopoulos tip, then the FBI isn't being straight. It would mean that the Bureau was spying on the Trump campaign prior to that moment, and that in turn would mean that the FBI had been spurred to act on the basis of something other than a junior campaign aide's loose lips. So, for those of you that, you need to keep track, originally back when the probe started, I believe that they were saying that it started because of Michael Flynn. Then they had to back off and say that was because of Paul Manafort. But once they figured out the only thing he could be indicted for was something that happened entirely unrelated to Trump, then they shifted and said something even dumber, which is that the probe was triggered by information about George Papadopoulos, who, if you hear that story, it's one of the most irrelevant things. It's like saying, you spot. It's like if I was to say, to Adrian, I watch him eating like some takeout Chinese food that he's spying for China. That's the equivalent of what they accused George Papadopoulos of.
Shit, you're on to me.
Yeah, better finish that Mugu Gai Pan, man. Where was I? So, and to the point, when precisely was this human resource operating? Because if it was prior to that infamous Papadopoulos tip, then the FBI isn't being straight. It would mean the Bureau was spying on the Trump campaign prior to that moment, and that in turn would mean that the FBI had been spurred to act on the basis of something other than a junior campaign aide's loose lips. That's why I already read that part. We also know that among the Justice Department's stated reasons for not complying with Nunes's subpoena, was it worried that to do so might damage international relationships? Okay, yeah. They stated, the Justice Department said, we can't comply with the subpoena because it might hurt our relationships with other countries. So this suggests the quote source may be overseas, have ties to foreign intelligence or both. Wow, that's a big thing, and I'll explain why in a second. That's notable given the highly suspicious role foreigners have played in this escapade. It was an Australian diplomat who reported the Papadopoulos conversation. Dossier author Christopher Steele is British, used to work for MI6, and retains ties to that spy agency as well as to a network of former spooks. It was a former British diplomat who tipped off Senator John McCain to the dossier. How this top secret source fits into this puzzle could matter deeply. I believe I know I think the guy's name is Comrade Trumpsky. I'm shilling for McCarthy's channel right now. I believe
better pay you good for that.
Yeah, man. I believe I know the name of that informant, but my intelligence sources did not provide it to me and refused to confirm it. Yeah, what if Trump is a spy against himself? Wouldn't that be crazy?
What if he is QAnon?
Right, yeah.
It would make sense, though. Like, just talking to him, not the QAnon thing, but Trump spying on himself. Like, that wouldn't even make any sense.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't make any less sense than any of the other crap going on.
No, absolutely. You're right on that.
Yeah. It would therefore be irresponsible to publish it, but what is clear is that we've barely scratched the surface of the FBI's 2016 behavior. And the country will never get the straight story until President Trump moves to declassify everything possible. It's time to rip off the Band-Aid. So this from Zero Hedge, which is, I like it. It's very, very reliable, compared to other online, news sources that analyze news. And it's always on Real Clear Politics at least once a week. So I don't, I use them for a lot of stuff. I think they're great. So please check out Zero Hedge if you want to check that out. I have the link in the description. So any thoughts before we move on to the last topic, which is Italy?
Not too much. Just that I think at this point, I'm just going to let this whole investigation play out because I think it's just going to do more damage to the Democratic Party than good. Because once this is going to go on for who knows how much longer, maybe another year, they're not going to find anything, and then I think it's just going to destroy all the remaining credibility for them. Also, on top of it, I think it's a little funny that they keep accusing Trump, the Trump campaign, of being colluding with Russia and like trying to steal the election. Yet we all heard about what was going on in the DNC in order to get Hillary in as the nomination over Bernie Sanders. Whether that has to be with was it Debbie Wasserman Schultz that was feeding Hillary Clinton questions during the debates?
Donna Brazil fed the questions during debates, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz limited the number of debates and kind of she did a number of other things to screw with Bernie. I think she was also leaking information about him to the Hillary campaign.
Okay, yeah. So there seems to be all this collusion and all this backdoor dealings going on in the DNC, but somehow we're focusing on Trump over this. So I can't help but feel this is more of the idea that the more that somebody is saying something, the more that they actually tend to support something, or the more the fact they did it. So I think that's really what this is all about. It's more about deflection than anything else.
Well, yeah, and I guess before these were two topics, like subtopics of the whole DNC thing that I did want to cover. Let's not spend too much time on it, but yeah, if they would have done the proper thing, done the right thing for their fans back in 2017 during the aftermath of the election, and gone to them and said, look, if you donated money to Bernie Sanders, let's cut a deal for some reimbursement. I don't even know if they could have reimbursed the whole sum, but something would have been at least a nice gesture. Let's say 75%. I would start at. Those people donated a lot of money to the Bernie campaign, and I think 200 something million dollars ended up being diverted in the end because he withdrew to the DNC. Because of the tainted process, it would have been a very, very good gesture, at least to say, look, sorry about that. We'll give you this money back as and that would have been something to build on. Only, just the foundation to regain the trust of a lot of these people, young people and old people that donated to the Bernie Sanders campaign, but they never engaged in even the minimal amount of I would say, compromise, penance, whatever you want to say, to reestablish the trust of the average voter. And they continue to smear these people in the press, through things like the Mattis file, which, we both know about, and other things of much more, high profile nature, all the time attacking them as basically also dupes and whatever. All sorts of things like that. By the way, if you haven't read the Mattis file, you should read it. It's also on the Hard News Network. And I had 2 interviews with Bernie delegates concerning it, but that's for a different day.
The only thing I'm going to say on that is I would recommend that if people want to learn about the Mattis file, they should just watch what you did on it, because you've got enough information and you did enough episodes on it that it covers most of it.
Right, yeah. You could either watch the videos or there's the articles on the Hard News Network, which I wrote. So, there's plenty of information out there, and I'm actually working with somebody from another publication, and he's gonna possibly San Diego area publication to pursue this even further.
Awesome.
So I actually didn't tell Adrian about that, but yeah, in the next week or so there could be some development on that front. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very enthusiastic about just pursuing this as far as it will go. The CNN poll from last, I think it was Wednesday, says the Democrats' 2018 advantage is nearly gone. And about 6 months out from Election Day, 47% of registered voters say they back the Democratic candidate, This is from a CNN poll. It's not from Fox News.
Oh, wow.
44% back the Republican. Voters are divided almost evenly over whether the country would be better off with the Democrats in control of Congress, 31%, or with the GOP in charge, 30%. A sizable 34%, including nearly half of the independent voters, 48%, say it doesn't matter which party votes for Congress. Wow, very surprising. The Democrats' advantage in the generic ballot dipped from 16 points in February to 6 points in March to just 3 points now. The party's advantage has waned among enthusiastic voters as Republican enthusiasm has grown. In March, 36% Republicans and Republican-leaning registered voters said they were enthusiastic about voting. That's up to 44% in the new poll. But the Democrats still have a double-digit lead among those most excited to vote this fall. 53% to 41%. We're not going to read the whole thing. Polling is bullshit to some extent, but, when they publish their polls and they warn about them, it does become a sign of panic. And I've actually been receiving emails, because I do receive emails from Democratic, fundraisers, saying, "Oh shit, we're in a lot of trouble right now." Let me see if there's one on my phone. But yeah, they're really panicking now, and the reason is, and it's very simple, is that Americans, they don't have an alternative. They have one party that pretends to like Trump, which is the Republican Party, and they have one party that openly thinks he's like the root of all evil, but they don't actually have a policy alternative. So yeah, I have one of these saved. 1 second. So it says, this is from the Democratic Governors Association. It says, CNN, for Dems, blue wave is now a trickle. Democratic Focus Group. Is electing Democratic governors important to you? It says, friends, this is alarming. CNN reports that Democrats are in danger of losing our blue wave this November. If we don't turn this around, Republicans will seize the chance to gut Medicare, dismantle Social Security, and defund Planned Parenthood. This actually make me want to go vote against the Democrats. Democratic governors are leading the charge. By the way, I live in a blue district, so my vote doesn't really matter, except for senator or governor. Democratic governors are leading the charge against the GOP's dangerous agenda and even pushing us forward from defending voting districts to expanding affordable health care. How about if they actually used reverse psychology and did the opposite of what they've been doing, it would probably be more affordable. But, let's not let that get in the way. But if we lose this November, we'll blow our chance at progress. We're working harder than ever to revitalize and re-energize our grassroots campaigns to win in November. But right now, we need to hear from 4,000 Democrats before tomorrow's strategy. Is electing Democratic governors important to you? So I think I did answer this survey, and I basically said no. And they screwed Dennis Kucinich in our state, who was actually a credible candidate for governor on the Democratic side, and they basically smeared him and said that he's an Assad puppet. That's another one I left out. If you're against the war, they'll say that you're for gassing civilians. And I'm not for Bashar Assad, but I'm not against people saying, I want to be a little skeptical before we go to war in another country. So a lot of people are very insulted by that. And I'm not even kidding. They're insulted by the implication that you would be called a supporter of war crimes by the fact that you want to at least investigate an event that has not been confirmed and that you have serious doubts about, as I did with that gassing, which, by the way, nobody's talking about because Trump banged a prostitute.
Well, we got to get back to the real news, banging a prostitute.
Right. So, Joe Biden, it says, the liberal everyman spoiling for a fight with Trump as 2020 looms. It says, let's just keep going, man. Fuck it.
All right, let's do it.
Among recent pilgrims to Arizona ranch of Senator John McCain was Joe Biden. This is from May 13th. In The Guardian, right? Because we all love The Guardian, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, because they've done such great work before.
Yeah, I think one of the big RussiaGate fanatics works for the Guardian. I think his name is like Luke Harding or something. I might have his name wrong. I think his name is Luke Harding. If I'm wrong, then I apologize to whoever the real Luke Harding is. Um, it, the Republican who has an aggressive form of brain cancer urged the former vice president to not walk away from politics, Biden told the New York Times. It did not take much imagination to see this as a metaphorical shove into the next race for the White House. Biden has the desire, the pedigree, and the rage. On Friday, incensed by reports that a White House aide had dismissed McCain with a terse comment, "He's dying anyway," the 75-year-old Democrat let rip, declaring that decency in the administration had finally hit rock bottom. So that brings to mind again the chicken shit comment about Benjamin Netanyahu, and also Ben Rhodes, the Obama Deputy National Security Advisor, once said that the American media is too stupid to know whether the Iran deal would be good or not, because he admitted on Larry Elder talks about this pretty frequently. He admitted that most American reporters are too dumb to know anything about Iran anyway. So, when he was Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor, he's like, yeah, I mean, we basically told them a bunch of crap, and they basically just repeated it and without even criticizing it. It was just the latest evidence that Biden is spoiling for a fight with Donald Trump, whereas Barack Obama has maintained a Zen-like calm even as his legacy is eviscerated. That's not true. Zen-like calm. What a bunch of bullshit. Biden has taken the gloves off, hammering the president's policies and personal conduct, even suggesting that he would like to beat the hell out of Trump over his crude remarks about women. Yeah, that's not very Buddhist of him. So I guess by comparison, yeah, Barack Obama has maintained a Zen-like calm. But in 2020, by the way, I think before we end today, I guess I'll say now I'm apologizing to defense contractors, transsexuals, Buddhists, vegans, because by the way, veganism is retarded. So I'm apologizing to vegans because I forgot to insult them earlier. Tim Hortons, which I actually do like. We have like a couple over here, so I do feel bad for them. And if I forgot anybody, let me know later, Adrian. So I'm apologizing now because I'm going to forget later.
I'll let you know if you forget anybody.
Right. Oh, and
I think Proto covered it.
And to sexual, I'm also apologizing if I also, let me repeat, I'm against sexual harassment. If anybody wants to twist my words later. I think that Keith Ellison and Tom Perez were talking about which interns they would rather sexually harass, but I'm not saying that would have been acceptable. But if I was them, that would probably have been what I would have talked about at dinner that day, because that's what they would have. Right?
Exactly. But hey, you know what? At the end of the day, I think they were just two guys having a conversation about what type of women they liked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were talking like 1 week before they were supposed to go up against each other for the DNC chair position. So, I mean, I'd like to hear exactly what they were talking about. But in 2020, he would be up against the most competitive and crowded Democratic field in many years. The point will be brought home on Tuesday when the Center for American Progress in Washington hosts. I wonder if this is on video. If it's on video, I'm going to probably watch some of it. So the Center for American Progress, does that name sound familiar, Adrian?
Oh, very familiar. I've been dealing with a lot of them lately.
So that's a big think tank over in Washington, run by a certain Neera Tanden and John Podesta.
John Molesta.
No, it's John. Was the yeah, the tag was Podesta the Molesta. Yeah, that's right. Allegedly, again.
I think it was Lennon McCarthy. Yeah, it was Lennon McCarthy in the chat who said, when we were talking about Joe Biden, he says, "There's no way Joe isn't a pedo. Look at the way what he does on camera." And I got to agree with him on that. I've always felt that Joe Biden was some sort of pedo.
Right, and the irony is that just for talking about them doing something that they've done on film, and it's publicly available, we can probably be given, all sorts of strikes or whatever, or for me just joking about whatever I've said earlier. We have to deal with that type of, self-censorship or whatever. So that's why, I guess we're going to have to do a mandatory 15 apologies per broadcast from now on my channel. I mean, you can decide whatever you want, because I know the laws in Canada are different and you have the metric system or something. So,
well, we're probably still bound by the rules and guidelines by YouTube, but I'm okay. Yeah, next time when I bring you on my channel next, we can just let loose. That doesn't bug me.
Yeah, so we'll figure it out. There's enough time.
Your channel's more based on live streams too than mine is. So if I was to lose my live streaming for 3 months, it wouldn't be a huge deal.
Yeah, I think I could figure out a way to do it without live streams, though. I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing, but it really is a sad state of affairs when like that guy earlier with the stupid the rant at that restaurant. It was a wrong thing to do, but they really have been hounding him in New York City, and I think there should be a limit to how much people. He didn't actually hit anybody. That's why I think that they've overreacted. That New York guy that was in the restaurant. So the Center of American Progress in Washington hosts potential contenders, including Senators Cory Booker, Sherrod Brown, Sherrod Brown is a dumbass. He's from my state. So I'm certainly not voting for him. Kirsten Gillibrand from New York, Amy Klobuchar, who is from Minnesota, I believe, Chris Murphy from Connecticut, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, and Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, as well as the former Housing Secretary Julian Castro and New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio. So these are all morons. When the intellectual brain trust of the Democratic Party is not even a member, that would be Bernie Sanders, who at least has some ideas. They might be ideas I completely disagree with, but they're ideas nonetheless. Then you're in trouble. And some of these people are really idiots. There's Big Bird, the mayor of New York, and some of these people are kind of faceless idiots. Cory Booker is the guy who can't stop talking about gay people in the military. And then there's Sherrod Brown, whose wife is basically a hyperventilating libtard. And she used to write for the paper here. And I guess closer to the election, I'm probably going to do a lot more material on her and him. Although he could be worse. Let's be honest. I mean, he could be... Al Franken was kind of an embarrassment. So he would have been a candidate if the Me Too thing hadn't happened. It says Bill Galston, a former policy advisor to Bill Clinton, said there are 3 lanes to look at. In lane 1, there is Bernie Light, which could be Bernie himself. In lane 2, there are people who think for a variety of reasons that's not the right way for the Democratic Party to go, and we ought to be the 21st century reformers. So I know what he means by that. Lane 3 is the Biden lane. He's really sui generis. I don't know how to pronounce that. That's a Latin term. Do you know how to, you know that term sui generis? Adrian, have you heard that? I don't know how to say it.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I think it means like the obvious choice or something. If people are looking for a unifier and don't want to shed innocent blood, the argument for Biden could be potent. On the other hand, he has always underperformed as a presidential candidate in the past. Yeah, he ran in 1990. I think it was either 92 or 90 or 88, and almost nobody voted for him in 88. And then in 2008, he was there basically to, he was, I guess he was there to provide some, background jungle vegetation for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in the debates,
So it took him 20 years to get relevant, and he's still not even that relevant?
Well, he was very successful in the Senate. He's a very good deal maker, in the Senate, and he was very good at bringing money to his home state of Delaware. And in that respect, I'd say you can at least say that as a senator for Delaware, he really overperformed, because the only thing that Delaware is known for in the U.S. is being a tax shelter for credit card companies, and it's partly because of Joe Biden and the way that he's been. I think he's been involved in the Senate Finance Committee. So again, I hope that when I write something or I do like a broadcast, I hope that I'm being fair, even to people I don't like Joe Biden. But the guy, I think he's a piece of shit, but he was probably a very good senator for the state of Delaware, because there's nothing there. In fact, if you really think about it, there's no reason to go to Delaware, because to the south is Maryland and to the north is Pennsylvania, but there's nothing in between them. The state of Delaware, and I'm not saying it to be offensive to the. I've never been to Delaware. I don't know anybody from there, so don't take this personally. But there's no real reason to go to Delaware if you're somewhere else. I think that they do have some good beaches, from what I heard, but there's no reason why anybody would, other than the tax perks, would locate a business in Delaware. So it's always been kind of one of those backwater states, and that guy George Thorogood, the guy who has that song "Bad to the Bone," he's from there. And "I Drink Alone," he also wrote that. So they have him, and they have Joe Biden. So they have two guys, two very. Joe Flacco went to college there, the guy who won the Super Bowl for the Ravens. That's about the only thing I know about Delaware, is that you have the guy who wrote "Bad to the Bone" is from there. Joe Biden, credit card tax shelters, and also certain nonprofit companies that do dirty business are over there. More on that coming, in a couple months maybe. That's a little teaser. And Joe Flacco. So that's Delaware, and that's the importance of Joe Biden. It says, was that a little too much information, man?
No, I was just going to say, if that's their rap sheet, then damn, Delaware is not doing very well.
Well, I mean, it's just geographic. I mean, let's look at the. I know we've really gone down some rabbit holes, but you can just look at it on a map, and you look here. There's New Jersey. Well, it's in between Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. But if you go down the coast, the Mid-Atlantic coast, there anything you can get anywhere else. There's nothing about Delaware that makes it unique in any particular way. You don't need to go through Delaware to get anywhere that you can't without. Oh, here's an excellent one. So I mean, there's roads that pass through it, that pass by it, so you can avoid going through Delaware if you need to. I mean, it's just how do we get to this topic? Joe Biden.
Yes, that's right.
So so apologies to Delaware. That's 30 apologies today. I think we're pretty much overdosing right now.
I was going to say, you're apologizing almost as much as a Canadian.
Yeah, I'm apologizing enough. I want a Nobel Peace Prize like Obama. He says Biden made Biden made unsuccessful bids for presidency in 1988 and 2008. So yeah, he was a pretty successful senator, and I don't think you can take that from him in terms of accomplishing things for the state of Delaware. He did not run in 2016 after the death of his son Beau, but he has repeatedly ruled out. I think he died from cancer, by the way. He has repeatedly not ruled out his shot at 2020. He published a book, Promise Me, Dad, and has been traveling the country, a tour extended beyond his original schedule. This week at an event organized by his own foundation and the Brookings Institution, he expressed indignation at the plight of the middle class, offered a preview of a nascent manifesto, and frequently veered off script for dramatic effect. He said, "I love Bernie, but I'm not Bernie Sanders." He said, "I don't think 500 billionaires are the reason why we're in trouble." We have not seen this huge concentration of wealth. The folks at the top aren't bad guys. I get in trouble in my party when I say wealthy Americans are just as patriotic as poor folks. I found no distinction. I really haven't. So, you see him receiving the Congressional Medal of Honor here. I think you can even see a tear in his eye. And here we go. I love this. For all the efforts at triangulation and his liberal credentials on abortion and gay marriage, the former vice president has counts against him. They include his age, his Clinton-like association with the party establishment, and copious video footage of him touching women, dubbed The Audacity of Grope by Comedy Central's The Daily Show. That's like a parody of Obama's book title was Audacity of Hope. Hardly a message the party wants to promote, even if Trump has been accused of worse. Henry Olson, a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and author of The Working Class Republican, said, "We're in the Me Too era. He has a reputation for being more tactile than is socially appropriate. There is energy in the feminist wing of the Democratic Party, and part of that is driven by the sexual misconduct allegations against Trump." Olson added, "Joe Biden has wanted to be president for decades. I'd be really surprised if he didn't go for it this time. This is his last chance. In the polls last time, he was clearly drawing from the right of the Democratic Party. That isn't going to change. The hardline progressive isn't going to say, 'Joe's our man.' That means he has the weaker hand." Biden may have to jostle for a position with Harris, Sanders, and other senators. So that's Kamala Harris. Former Attorney General Eric Holder, ex-Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu. I mean, that guy's not going to be president. And Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, the guy who was pretty much, I think, a homeless person threw a sign at him or something. Oh, no. He received like a award from the mayor, from Mayor Garcetti, and he ripped up the award right in front of him and said, "Hey, I mean, you haven't helped the homeless at all." So then, even so, Bob Shrum, a Democratic strategist and senior advisor to past presidential campaigns, said, "The most likely person, in my view, is Joe Biden. He has the broadest support in the party. He can speak across the constituencies, and he's well liked. That's important." So yeah, this is they're calling him the everyman because he called himself working class Joe for years, but I mean, he's been in the Senate or the vice president since like the 80s. So, who the fuck are these people kidding?
Yeah, this doesn't sound like the working class at all. Like this working class is supposed to be people who brought themselves up, who actually knew what like a hard life is. This actually guy sounds much more like a champagne liberal than anything else.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can't believe he didn't. I can't believe Biden though didn't get hit with the Me Too movement. Like some of the ways that he treated some of the young girls and wives that we saw on TV. Actually, there was this one time where like I can't remember who it was, but some guy goes up to the podium to start giving a speech or something like that. I think he just received an award, and Biden's just sitting there, like rubbing his wife's shoulders, and you could just see him like he just keeps turning to Biden and just keeps looking at Biden like, "What the fuck are you doing, man? Like, what are you doing to my wife?" His wife looked super uncomfortable too.
Right. Yeah, I saw like several videos of those, and it's just you kind of wonder. I mean, how many years has he gone by? I mean, in the past, he probably got away with a lot of things like this that weren't even caught on camera.
Who knows what he hasn't been caught on camera? I mean, I know there's enough people that probably think that he's actually done something. Well, probably that he's engaged in some sort of pedophilia or sexual harassment or something like that.
Right, and Ted Kennedy in his time was known. Ted Kennedy and I think Chris Dodd, who is no longer in the Senate, were known to be very like forward with women, and I think one of them even assaulted a waitress one time and smacked her or something. So last topic, Italy is forming a new government. Love this cartoon. Can you see it?
Not yet. But I just give it a minute. I think the video's a little bit behind, like the actual YouTube video. So I'll come see it in a minute.
Right. So they have this Italian court jester basically punking Macron, because Italy it says they're turning on the European Union. And this is from The Spectator, which is a British traditional establishment conservative newspaper or magazine. I think they're a magazine. And they run good articles, but I don't think this is entirely surprising. It says, it looks indeed as if Italy, the beating pulse of European civilization. Well, I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. Will be the first country in Western Europe to fall to what's popularly known as populism. Those who regard populism as an affirmation of democracy are pleased. Those who regard it as a negation of democracy are appalled. The markets remain silent for the moment. The alt-left five-star is on the verge of forming a coalition government with the hard-right Lega and the EU's fourth largest economy, which has been stuck in more or less permanent stagnation since the global banking crisis of 2008. So far as I know, it could be, even with this good turn against the EU, I think Italy could have like a crazy financial crash because of their banking situation. So that could pretty much destroy the euro forever. These two opposing expressions of popular revolt, described by the ever so civilized Financial Times on Monday as the modern barbarians at the gates of Rome, are busy in secret trying to find a politician who can be their prime minister and draft a contract of government which will not cause them to tear each other to shreds within months of taking office. And then on Tuesday, a leaked copy of this document was published revealing that despite their deliberate silence on such matters during the election campaign, Lega and Five Star have not given up their shared hostility to the euro or their shared desire to abolish sanctions against Russia. I don't care does anybody care if Italy and Russia have sanctions against each other? I mean, does anybody honestly care?
I've honestly never heard them even talk about sanctions between the two countries. So yeah, I gotta say they really probably don't care. And it doesn't really surprise me that Italy's going in this direction either, because Italy's been one of those countries that's been hit hardest by the illegal immigration crisis. I remember seeing there was what looked to be cruise ships would be dropping off like fuck tons of sorry, I don't know if you like it if I swear or not on your podcast on your show, so I'm sorry. I'll try and watch my language. But yeah, we just see them dropping off huge amounts of immigrants into the country, and then they're dealing with the same thing that a lot of the other European countries are dealing with, whether that's an increase of violence or the culture war that's going on. So it doesn't really surprise me that Italy's making this move towards populism. And I also find that America is usually the trendsetter for the world, so whatever tends to happen in America will eventually make its way around.
Yeah, so far as the profanity, I mean, I don't care. Just use the Oxford comma in your spoken sentences. So that's about
the Oxford comma?
Yeah. Yeah, on lists, you do a comma at the end, right? So.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
Yeah. Just make sure to do that. It's very important.
Okay.
Specifically, the contract. Okay, so sanctioning against Russia, and though they want Italy to remain in NATO, to rehabilitate Russia as a strategic mediator in crisis zones such as Syria. Why is that a bad idea? Specifically, the contract includes a proposal to create an opt-out mechanism for Eurozone countries to leave the euro in an agreed manner, were there to be a clear popular will to do so. It also proposes radical reform of the EU, in particularly of the Stability and Growth Pact, which compels member states to keep budget deficits below 3% of GDP. To tackle Italy's staggering $2.3 trillion public debt, the third highest in the advanced world as a percentage of GDP. I think we might be the highest, though, so America. So I don't know if that's... how bad is Canada's? Do you have any idea? The public debt as percentage of GDP?
It's getting pretty damn bad at the moment, actually. We got hit pretty hard after the 2008 financial crisis, but we were slowly working our way back. But ever since Trudeau came into office, it's been even worse. By the time our last prime minister got out of office 2 years ago, we were about $500 billion in debt. 2 years under Trudeau, we're now over $1 trillion in debt. So we're really not doing well. And also my province of Ontario, we have about 10% of the population of California. Our debt is 3 times what California has. California is like $100 billion in debt. We're over $300 billion in debt.
U.S.
So
dollars?
we ain't doing so good. What's that?
U.S. dollars?
No, this one we'd be talking Canadian dollars, so maybe not actually would be 3 times the debt, but it's pretty damn close.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's American Canadian dollars are very close in value, right?
About 77 cents, I believe, right now, Canadian to the American dollar.
Okay.
So maybe it's like if we'd probably be 2.5 times actually instead of 3 times, but still, for kind of considering how we have about 10% of the population, that is not good.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I mean, California is also pretty bad, but I mean, you just described something crazy. About the 5-star, okay, so it also proposes radical reform of the EU, in particular the Stability and Growth Pact, which compels member states to keep budget deficits below 3% of the GDP. To tackle Italy's staggering 2.3 trillion euro public debt, the third highest in the advanced world as a percentage of GDP, the document includes a demand that the European Central Bank writes off 250 billion euro worth of Italian sovereign bonds bought under its massive quantitative easing program begun in 2012 to save the euro. Wow, that's Paul Krugman's going to be pissed because I think that was his whole quantitative easing is like the economic porn of the Keynesian economics, I believe. That was the I don't know how to describe what quantitative easing is. Maybe I need to look it up.
I may have to. Yeah, I'll take a look after we're done.
I'll just read a small definition. The introduction of new money into the money supply by a central bank. Okay, so yeah, just deliberate inflation. Okay, that was quick.
Wow, deliberate inflation. That's like the worst thing you could friggin' do for your dollar.
Yeah, let's print money.
I mean, was it Zimbabwe did that, and now they're completely their dollar value is worthless now, pretty much on the international stage.
Yeah, they had to reintroduce new currencies. Venezuela's gone through the same thing. There's been a couple countries that I think Russia had to do it one time in the 90s. I mean, with them it was not as easy to blame them, but I mean, there's ways it can just happen, but this is not as drastic as the ones with Zimbabwe or whatever, but they are bad. And in Italy's situation, it could end up being bad enough to scuttle the euro. But the 5-star and Lega swiftly issued statements to say the document was old and already radically changed. It is dated May 14th, Monday. Whatever your views on populism, what is happening in Italian politics makes it crystal clear that Italians, like so many people throughout Europe, believe that their governments and the European Union have failed them. The Italians were once the most Europhile people in Europe. Now, especially the young, they are among the most hostile. And so that's the opposite of Britain, where the youth are mostly pro-Euro. And they really are sick to death of those among their countrymen and women who have wheeled their way into membership of the corrupt and obscenely overpaid political class which has dominated Italian politics since the early 1990s, or since the last political class, which was even more rotten and overpaid, was booted out. So what they're talking about is this show, my shitty show, I call American Gladio, because Gladio was the CIA-backed American pro-American Italian government program in Italy. The CIA had all these candidates that were paid off in order to keep Italy from going communist during the Cold War. But they didn't run the country like they wanted to run it for Italy. They were running the country so that they could, get rich and, bang hookers, which, everybody, we should all hope to do that. Like Keith Ellison and Tom Perez probably want to. So, and they do it in Italy. So if it's acceptable in Italy, it should be acceptable in Gary, Indiana. Right. So, man, these, American Gladio. Why am I calling it that? Because it's the same type of template. It's the same type of Italian corruption based on commitment to, foreign funders. In that case, it was the CIA. In this case, it's all these global equity funds, the Soros Group or whatever in America, And our politicians, they need to have an accountability to the constituents. This is not conspiracy thinking. This is just saying, there has to be accountability to the constituent. If you're from, Peterborough, Ontario, that's a city in your province, right? You want to vote for somebody who is, accountable for the people of Peterborough, not for the people of, Saint-Tropez in France, which is where a lot of these rich and famous people used to vacation, at least. And I mean that to me, I think, is the spirit of having a republic and a democracy. Let me see if the people are still there. I think some people might be nodding off and sleeping, but no, they're still
We
here.
lost a couple, but we're still good.
Yeah, Jeffrey's here. Jeffrey's the one that matters, right? Because he's the one from Kansas. We're talking to Kansas, everybody. It's Kansas's world. With Larry Brown and the Kansas Jayhawks winning the NCAA title in '88. That's the only thing that matters. I'm just spitting gibberish now. Anyway, we're not going to read the whole article. We've gone on long enough. There's also fears that it will scuttle the euro here. This is from Reuters. Those of you that can see it already. Let me see. Len McCarthy, what did he say before? What are you guys talking about bees for? I don't get it. Is that like a... I really can't follow this conversation. I think they're talking about something with Pulp Fiction. So...
Chat really got out of hand there if they're going all the way to Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. So, Royale with Yeezy. So now they've taken it to Kanye West.
But in terms of what's going on in Italy, I think it maybe it actually would be worthwhile for people to go off the euro and get back onto a more local currency. I mean, at least one thing about it is, one thing that I don't like about the European Union is that it really has taken away the sovereignty of the local countries there, and that's also one of the main problems I also have with the United Nations, is that it tends to get involved with the decisions that are made in the sovereignty of a nation. So maybe these countries do need to get off the euro. The euro needs to die, and the European Union needs to die, and they need to go back to doing what's good for their countries rather than what's good for the entire continent of Europe. That's just like one of the big problems I see with politics these days in the whole globalist movement, is that there's still problems inside these individual countries, each one, your country, my country, these European countries. But people seem to think that we're past this, that because the world has become more connected, now we need to worry about all of the world's problems at the same time. And I don't really think we're there yet. I think we need to worry about what's going on in our own countries first before we can actually go on and try and make a difference on the entire world stage.
Yeah, I think those of us that are, we're in this, we talk in the same circles. We're not looking for a utopian solution, right? But there's people around the world, not just in Europe, but in like Africa. And this guy is from Ghana. What the hell?
Which guy?
Here we go. This president from Ghana, he has this video, which is a bit surprising. He says, we don't need aid anymore. It's not really helping, and it's the same idea that foreign aid is a problem. These supranational bodies like the EU are a problem. We need people to really, every country should kind of run its own house, try to do the best possible. And there's still going to be some wars every now and then. What are you going to do? I mean, you can't. I mean, if you're a parent, let's say you have two kids. One of them gives the other one a wet willy. Are you supposed to turn around and yell at them from the front seat of the car? I'll turn this car around. That's basically the EU. I will turn this car around. I'm done. That's not the way to run the world. And that's the way the EU runs it. They basically tell other countries how to run their show, but it's not them. It's not the stuff that should actually concern the EU. It's stuff that benefits the EU as an institution. And they've grown fat and corrupt. And let me see if I can get the important points here, and we'll close.
Sounds good. And I will give the EU at least a little bit of credit that I think it was necessary after World War II, especially with right after how we ended with the fight. After we ended the fight with the Nazis, there was the whole fight between between communism and capitalism, America versus Russia. So I think in some ways that during that time, the EU did help save Europe from falling apart even more, and it helped it build up. But by now, it's just grown. It's past its due date, there's no reason for these countries to be in it. And anybody that goes against the EU, we do see what the danger, like how they are turned upon. I mean, that's what's going on in Hungary and Poland, considering how these two countries have refused to take in the refugees and migrants over the last few years. And now other countries are have threatened sanctions against them simply because it won't comply with them. It just seems like a power trip these days.
Or Catalonia, which is a left-wing part of Spain, which wanted to separate from Spain, and the EU won't let them leave Spain, and they're basically ignoring them and letting the Spaniards imprison their leaders. So let's see if we can get some of his main points here. This is President Yahya Nana Akufo of Ghana talking to Emmanuel Macron, who's kind of an interesting character, but I mean, let's not belabor the point. 20 seconds in.
On the basis of whatever support the Western world or France or the European Union can give us. It will not work. It has not worked, and it will not work. Our responsibility is to charter a path which is about how we can develop our nations ourselves. It is not right for a country like Ghana, 60 years after independence, to still have its health and education budgets being financed on the basis of the generosity and charity of European taxpayers. By now, we should be able to finance our basic needs ourselves.
All right, so I'm just going to pause it because, we can keep going forever. But, I think that speaks for itself. Just my stupid opinion, Adrian Lloyd. Any final words? I'll let you have the last word tonight.
I would just think that he said it perfectly, and the Ghana president there, it was perfectly worded. It's that after all, in the independence, you can't be relying on other countries to help build you up. You got to build you up yourself. I would say that's a lot of the same problems that we have with the welfare state, that it becomes an addiction and you're relying on other people to look after you. And in that case, you're not looking after yourself. So I completely agree that I think a lot of this, there are times where definitely you can send some monetary support or some more humanitarian support in order to help. But these countries have to build up themselves. Otherwise, they're just going to remain having the same problems that they have had for decades now, centuries even for some of them. So I think this whole globalism idea is actually done more harm than good in the world.
Yeah, and that's about it. So that was the last word from Adrian Lloyd. You can find him, Just My Stupid Opinion, on YouTube. Any other channels in the you guys all know, I've mentioned Lennon McCarthy in the chat. He does a lot of cartoons. He actually had a good take on the MS-13 problem earlier today. I actually watched it a couple hours ago. Other channels I'd recommend are Alicia Clegg. She's not on today. I think she was having some other things she was doing. And that's about it. So have a good night, and have a good weekend if I don't speak to you tomorrow.
Are you able to hang around just for a minute after we go offline? I just something I want to quickly talk to you about.
Yeah, I'll stop the stream. I might not have another stream until Tuesday though.
Okay.
Okay, so 1 second.
Thanks for having me on, man.
No problem. Good